into another video output thing from that D&D podcast. This one is a special episode where we will be interviewing John Harper. So I guess let's introduce ourselves and then give him a large block of time to talk about himself and all the things he does. So I'm Aaron. I do some DMing on various campaigns, and yeah.
Go, Zach.
Okay. Hi, I'm Zach. I play in a lot of Aaron's games, and I have DM'd a little bit.
And I'm Andrew. You might remember me from DMing Blades in Gastown, which is why I'm slightly freaking out right now, because that's John Harper.
Hi, I'm John Harper. I'm the author of Blades in the Dark and other games. I'm broadcasting from the past, apparently, or from Duskwall, or I don't know what's going on, but we're going to run with it, and I'll be old-timey tonight for comedy's sake.
I think your webcam can just see into your soul.
Yeah, that's definitely what it is. There are only two colors, black and gray, so the webcam did get that right.
Ooh. So I guess let's start off with Blades, since that's the one that we're most familiar with. So we've been kind of looking at different interviews other people have done, and we watched one that Adam Coble did, and he kind of started off, and he had 3 questions. So here's the 3 game design questions. What is your game about? What do the players do, and how are they rewarded?
Jared Sorensen still haunting me to this day.
Yep.
Crush you, Jared. So I have a opinion about these questions. You guys tell me what you think.
Okay.
I think they're great. I recommend them to designers all the time. I think they're very smart questions, especially and maybe only when you're developing the game. It's a good way to focus your thoughts and look for pitfalls. The distinctions are very important, right? What the game is about, what the characters do, how you're rewarded for it. There's a slightly longer set of questions that parses out like what do the characters do versus what the players do, and there's other ways to do it. I'm not trying to get out of answering this question. I will answer it if you want me to, but I think I kind of feel like once the game is published and is out there in everyone else's hands, it sort of has to speak for itself, kind of. Mm-hmm. Like I can answer those questions, but coming from me, it's sort of like aspirational. Like, well, I hope it does this, and I hope you're rewarded this way. So I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but like I would be curious to hear your answers as people who've played Blades in the Dark and like have experienced it. I know what I was hoping for when I designed the game, but like hearing your thoughts as someone who isn't the designer would be cool, I think. But I don't know. I'm
going to go out on a limb here and ask or assume that you believe in the death of the author.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where I went with that too.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think I'm a little like not hardline about that. Like I think particularly in the community space and in the mentorship and fellow designer space, it makes a lot of sense to be much more involved, and your opinions matter and your point of view matters more in that space. But yeah, like in terms of the player facing thing, the post-release life of the product, I think it has to stand on its own feet and be its own thing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Can I turn that around on you a little bit?
Sure.
Have you ever gotten a chance to play Blades in the Dark?
Yeah.
Did somebody run it for you?
Yeah, but not nearly enough.
If you
I can
ever
agree with
want
that
to, you can come hang out with us.
Tell you what.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I would like that. Normally, I'm pretty conscientious about that. When I'm developing something, I really want to be a player as much as possible because that's the main thing.
You want to view from both sides of the fence, kind of.
Yeah, in this case, the like primary local game group that was the playtest group for me at the beginning. A couple of the people in that group they play the way I do. They're very aggressively kind of character driven and not They're not risk averse. That kind of style. You know, they want to dive in and punch the bad guys in the face, and just really get very stuck in. So I was like, okay, that's whatever Dylan does is probably going to be mostly what I would be doing. I think that's mostly okay. And then we got somewhat uniquely with Blades, like the way that the GM authority stuff functioned, it started to be different and weird enough where I was like, okay, I need to spend more time on that side of it. I need to really focus. But the downside was, I haven't gotten to play Blades much at all. So I would love to. That'd be great. Hit me up. Maybe we can schedule it. That'd be fun.
We have some serious character stories we can tell you about. I beat someone to death with the gate for a fortress.
Listen, Rage Essence is a hell of a drug.
It really is. Wow.
Is.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with that stuff.
So sort of recentering. Going back to Jared's questions that you already talked about, you weren't really into answering sort of post-production.
I mean, yeah. Well, yeah.
Did you have a different feeling about them having played the game? Like, was your impression as a player different than your impression as a designer?
No, it wasn't. I think, at least from my point of view, again, like, I feel like I'm not the best person to talk about the game in this way, but
that's fair.
From my point of view, I think Blades has a pretty high signal to noise ratio there. Like what the game says it is and what the mechanics focus on are pretty closely aligned. Like there isn't a lot of pretty much everything that you think you're going to do in being a crew of scoundrels, the game does those things, and it doesn't really do much else. So I think for some games, it's harder to navigate those questions because you have a lot of different ways to approach it and a lot of different angles to attack it from. Blades is not nuanced in that way. It just goes, well, what do you do when you're criminals? And it gives you, it's very blunt.
You literally lay out the approaches available.
Yeah. and that was part of the main design goal for the game, was because we've, as gamers, I think all of us, but especially like Shadowrun players or fantasy city D&D players, everyone's done that thing where you play a crew of criminals of some kind, of scoundrels, or you're doing heists, or you're doing Shadowrun type jobs or whatever. And we've all got a lot of experience making a game system work for that type of play and sort of bending it over to do that. So I thought, well, if I'm going to design a game about that, I should just take out the sort of the core system stuff that those games have that you're bending to the heist game, and just only build the heist game part. And then it ultimately kind of grew a little larger than that, but it was very much like strip it all down, just kind of make it worth its own existence. Had to justify, like, why don't we just use Fate and run heist? Why don't we just use D&D and run heist? Like, it kind of had to justify its existence with just these very straightforward one-to-one connector kind of mechanics.
It's definitely its own thing, for sure. And it's not trying to do anything else, which I think it's funny because announced today, in fact, the first like official Forged in the Dark game based on Blades is coming out, which is like a super pulpy adventure-y space game. Not dark and gritty and brutal. Strash and John have like created something very different using that system, but I think it's the same type of mentality. Just it's also stripped down just for pointing in a different direction.
I've seen a number of like hacks, reskins, and I mean just projects and games being developed with that Forged in the Dark core. And they all seem to share that sort of coherency or like singular-minded design.
Yeah.
So do you think that like the core that you built there is... Why do you think it is, I guess, that everything that sort of comes out of Blades in the Dark and Forged in the Dark has that singular structure?
I think part of it is that thing we're talking about where there is the just direct, like what you're doing in the fiction. You have these mechanical building blocks. You're on a job or you're in downtime, and then there's this little sort of vague free play thing on top of that. But it's pushing you into these different modes, and then the actions are the sets of verbs that are the things your characters are going to do. And so I think once you start hacking it, even if you change all the verbs to different verbs and you change the game phases to different phases, you still have that underlying skeleton of these are the
phases and verbs.
And these are phases, and so it Adam and I talked about this. We did a talk a long time ago about hacking the game and came up with this idea that called the poetry layer of RPG design, where you're it's like a writing project. The skeleton stays where it is, and you come in and you change the language component of the game. Change this word for that one, change this verb for that one, call downtime something else, give it a different purpose, but keep the same skeletal pieces where they are. And I think most game hacking is like that.
Yeah.
But with some games, it's hard to see what your changes are doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you create a new set of skills for your homebrew D&D game, like it's hard to see exactly how that's going to affect the game. If you keep combat the way it is and you just swap out your skill set, like how often are these going to come up? What's the range of DCs? What should it be? I don't know. Can I just bluff somebody with a diplomacy check, or is it, what's the deal? And Blades is, like I said, it's such a blunt instrument. It's very easy to make one change, just change prowl to traverse, and you go, okay, well that's different now, and I know exactly how it's different. It's very, very simple.
That actually sort of nicely dovetails into another question. So the 12 verbs in Blades do shape a lot of how players interact, and it's also how they think about problems, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And reportedly, there's a number that changed many times through development. But I'd like to ask you the story of the murder verb.
Yeah. That was sad. For a long time, the game had murder and mayhem as actions.
Oh, that's good.
Which are just so good.
They really are.
You really want to roll mayhem. That's just super fun, and murder super fun.
Yes, I have 4 dice in murder.
Yeah, exactly.
Mayhem is an automatic 2 or 3 dice skill on every character, right?
Oh yeah, you gotta have your mayhem turned into wreck.
Okay, I was about to ask.
That makes sense.
Yeah. For various reasons, nothing like super compelling on that one. It just sort of worked out that way. But with murder, everyone loved it. It survived from the very beginning of the game all the way. Well, not the very beginning, but almost the whole game to the Kickstarter version when we launched. Because everyone just loved, of course, like I'm gonna roll my murder dice, haha. And it was so good that it blinded us to the problem, which was all of those verbs need to be things your character is doing, not outcomes you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And so murder was, I'm trying to kill a guy, but it didn't tell you what you were doing. So once we realized that problem, everything had to shift to, it's not about what you're trying to achieve. It's about what your character is actually doing right now. And you can use an action for a wide variety of different goals.
Yeah, definitely.
But you couldn't do that with murder. You only had one goal with that. So
that kind of sounds like the difference between intent and task in Burning Wheel.
Yes, it is exactly that. Blades is, people always talk about Apocalypse World when they talk about Blades, which they should, but I'm a big Burning Wheel guy, and that game is a huge influence on Blades in every way. And the whole family, like Torchbearer and Mouseguard and Burning Empires, and you can see it in Burning Empires, right? There's like the strict phases of play and the way that you use your downtime in projects to do stuff, and that I'm pulling a lot of stuff from the Burning Wheel kind of family. And intent and task is one of those things that it's elucidated super well in Burning Wheel. Yeah, nice. Luke does such a good job of like training you with the text and how to use his system to make those things function. And I was like, well, I can just do the same thing, but maybe I can also kind of trick you. Like I'll build it in a way that makes it sort of takes care of it, kind of. And you can't help but kind of do the intent task thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, that was sorry.
you
Go
got-
ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
you were talking
Sorry.
about Kickstarter a few minutes ago, and I think we just passed an anniversary for you. It was
Yep.
what, Tuesday? You made a year since the campaign finished.
Yeah. Well, it's been a little longer than that, but since the like kind of official
Oh, the full release, I think. it
like
was.
full
Yeah,
release
yeah.
wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Kickstarter itself was a weird experience. It was awesome. Like the support was super great. But it really was a shift in workflow and like game design and thinking and everything. Because I say we, back then it was pretty much just me, but I was confident I had everything nailed down and the game was solid and ready to go. It was going to be like a third the size that it is, and that was that. And then, man, Kickstarter was just such a great boon to the game. It changed everything. That bigger exposure led to a lot of people playing it that were outside of that indie little sphere, and things that we were so sure about in our own playtesting that were so solid and straightforward. We were like, oh, not everyone knows how to do that. We have to actually really like explain that. And then once Evil Hat got involved, it just got so much better. Like they're so smart about making a product and what's needed to sell a book and what should be in it. And I'm always super minimal and try to like make everything very opaque and like figure it out. And they're kind of on the other side, and they really brought a lot to that whole process. And Sean and Karen in particular really like took what was there and gave me the tools to expand it out into a full thing. But with that, we just hit that anniversary, and it's been an awesome year. I gotta say, like, we won some awesome awards, and the support's been super good. The sort of expanding fan base for it is really awesome, and
yeah, that's cool.
I'm psyched. I'm not like super stunned. Like, fantasy heists is a thing. People love that, right?
Yeah.
If I was writing some weird like parlor drama thing or something, that'd be different. But this is an easy sort of sell to gamers. You want to be a cool thief, Yeah, sure. But even so, I'm surprised. It's so cool to see so many people playing it. I love it.
It's really well deserved.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of fun jamming it and playing in the one season that I've got to play in. You made a great product, and
Thanks.
Hats off to you and everyone who helped you.
Evil hats
And very,
off.
yeah,
Ooh.
evil hats off.
Oh.
I
See,
regret
no.
nothing. I regret nothing.
You shouldn't.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah, it was basically, how do you feel on the 1 year anniversary of the project being completed, and
Yeah.
if you had a chance to pass on any advice to, say, another person who is where you were when you started the Kickstarter campaign, like, what advice would that be?
Work in the industry for 20 years.
Obviously.
Give away your best work for free on your website. And then be an overnight success. That's all you got. That's all you got to do. No, seriously, I think, and I've talked to Luke about this too. Luke Crane, who Burning Wheel, but also he works at Kickstarter. He runs games at Kickstarter, the games team, or he doesn't run it, but he's like one of the main people. And there's the Kickstarter like mentality has shifted over time to these big splashy things like Numenera or 7th Sea and these like giant kinds of successes and things, which are awesome.
A giant plastic hand?
Sure, why not? And that's great. It's good for the hobby. It's great for our whole thing. But I know that Kickstarter also really cares about and wants smaller projects. And my one piece of advice for Kickstarter would be, don't feel like your project isn't deserving of Kickstarter because it's not some giant release or something. The smallest little project, no matter what it is, if you need $500, if you need 1,000, if you need 10,000, whatever your range is, that platform can help you achieve those things. And I know some people kind of just don't think of it that way. They think of it for these big splashy projects. So if you get something that's almost to the finish line, you need to pay for art for your cover, or you want to pay an editor, or so whatever. Going to Kickstarter can be, especially now, because it's way past the point of having to explain to people what it is. And like back when Dungeon World launched, it was the idea of doing a Kickstarter for a game was still weird and new and unusual. And now it's so much easier to implement it for smaller things. So don't be afraid of doing that. And also, Vincent Baker talks about this. I think that's where I learned it. The idea that your initial forays into tweeting about your game, sharing your playtest doc, getting feedback on a forum, getting a response on Twitter, all of that is teaching you the potential marketing space for your product. If you tweet about your game for week after week after week and no one cares, that doesn't mean you shouldn't make it, but it means you're probably not going to make any money from it. It might be a very hard sell, at least right now, right? 10 years from now, maybe it's different. So navigate that space, decide what you want for yourself. Are you doing this to make a product and make money and be in a business situation? Are you making the thing for your own personal passion or whatever? And let the way that the community reacts to it and the kind of connections that you make be your guide in how it might be received by a bigger audience later down the road.
Definitely. Excuse me, jeez.
Whoa.
I managed to go 20 minutes without doing that.
I was gonna say that one beer's getting to you.
Yeah. So in the book and in a couple other places I've seen you talk or read stuff that you've written, you have sort of cited a really large and eclectic set of inspirations for Blade specifically, and then sort of your larger design process and thought process in general.
Yeah.
To what degree do the things outside of gaming sort of influence what you design, and do you consciously pull stuff from outside experiences?
Yeah. It a lot. They influence me a whole lot, particularly with something like this that's a genre thing. There's a lot of stuff in the genre from all different directions, from The Wire to Ocean's 11, Thief and Dishonored, and just there's all kinds of different things, the Fafhrd and Grey Mouse or whatever. There's a million different takes on this genre. So generally speaking, I think as a designer, I try to play into genre very heavily because I think it's a powerful tool in gaming. It lets you get off the ground much faster.
Yeah.
Something like Lady Blackbird, you can say like, oh, it's like Firefly, but it's steampunk and also kind of Star Wars. And whatever you think when someone says that is exactly right for Lady Blackbird. You automatically understand the game. You can't get it wrong at that point. It's everything you think is going to fit that thing. That's not the only way to make a game, but for my own approach, I like to do that. I like to really lean on the pop culture references that are accessible to a certain segment of the audience and the genre expectations. So often I will try to kind of program my subconscious to have stuff to chew on. During the development of Blades, I watched a lot of movies and stuff and TV and played games intentionally to sort of focus on that. But like, aside from the dedicated like work time playing Dishonored or whatever, just sitting at the computer writing, I had a Twitch streamer playing Darkest Dungeon on like every day, all day. Not because that game is exactly Blades or anything, but just the atmosphere of it, the feel, the language, the grind of it, the stress and trauma happening in the background, like it was just feeding into my brain
Yeah.
and giving me
Yeah.
6 weeks later, when I'm writing something about a demon, I have some cool bit of evocative language that pops out that probably
Nice.
was influenced
Nice.
by Wayne June,
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
cool stuff. So it's both, and I think it's important as a creator. I think you get this after you work for a little while. Like the things have to incubate, right? You can focus and do research and go, okay, how does this work on Narcos? Like, how does the criminal organization Escobar's thing, how did it operate? Who was in charge? What if you're a smuggler? What do you do? And it's very intentional. But then there's also that like unconscious stuff where you're seeding your brain with imagery and language and ideas, and they bubble up later on in ways that you don't really know exactly where it came from, but it's good to load the canon with the right kind of stuff. And as a visual artist too, I'm always very cognizant. I have my Hellboy right there in front of me right now. I try to put things in my periphery that are going to seed that, because all of that stuff is just constantly kind of programming you. So,
Oh yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
yeah, definitely. It's a mix of intentionality and not, but I take it pretty seriously, to the point where like people recommend games to me, video games or something, and I'm like, I can't play that right now. I'm working on a different kind of project. I gotta
awesome.
wait. I'll
mess
do
up
it
my
later,
flow.
but
That's
I'm
really
working on lasers and feelings. I can't.
it's gonna get into. I can't do it.
Which, by the way, fantastic name.
Yeah, lasers and feelings is amazing.
Well, that's not my name. That's the Double Clicks. I stole that from them, but yeah.
Oh. I got a couple of one quick follow up and one follow up that might be a little bit more substantial. So, do you ever specifically go into other media that's like not games, like looking to mine keywords,
Mhm.
like to name things?
Oh yeah,
Like
absolutely.
Your action words or your
Yeah, when I was this was like before the big final crunch on Blades, like probably, I don't know, over a year ago maybe. When the first season of first or second season of Narcos was out. My then girlfriend, now wife, Allison, and we were obsessed with Narcos and like binged it to death. And she will attest, like every half hour, 45 minutes, I would pause, get up, walk over to my notebook, like write something down, go back, start it up again. A turn of phrase or just a concept, like, and then there should be an entanglement where they like grab one of your people and turn them against you. Like that should be a thing. That has to be part of the game.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
A+ entanglement as well.
Yeah,
it's right. That's directly from that episode of Narcos where they do that, and I was like, yes, that's going in the game.
My other sort of probably longer maybe follow is I watched another talk that you did where you basically stated that one of the major differences between mainstream games and indie games, amongst all the other big ones, was that indie games cite their sources essentially. Like they create authors create bibliographies, designers, like this is where this came from and what you should expect from it. How does it feel to be in those bibliographies now?
It's great. I mean, that's the thing. That's our hobby. At least the way I come at it. I started a little more slightly in the mainstream, I guess. I worked on Talislanta and like
Wizards,
Feng Shui and Everway playtester and that, early Wizard stuff and that kind of thing. Blue Planet was my first actual like project that I worked on for gaming, but not exactly mainstream. That's still kind of indie, but
yeah,
you know what I mean. Like traditional RPG style, I guess. But then the real changing point for me was running into the Forge in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I happened to be in Seattle, and Clinton Nixon, the co-founder of the Forge, happened to live near me, and Matt Wilson, who wrote Primetime Adventures, I met him right at the same time, and that like Seattle Gamer thing was happening. And those guys that was their deal. They were like, this like art collective kind of, and it was all about promoting each other's work and building on people who have come before you. So I forget who it was who started it, but it was probably Sorcerer, if I had to guess, that had something in there like, hey, here's my bibliography, here's my ludography, and this is all the stuff you should play. This is all the stuff that I read when I was working on this. And, you know, even Appendix M, like D&D, like Gary wrote all these you know, you should read Tanith Lee, which thank goodness, because that's why I read Tanith Lee. But there's a weird like disconnect there when you cross a certain invisible line in the marketplace. Sometimes it makes sense from, I guess, a marketing and legal point of view. I don't know if Hasbro would be cool with listing a bunch of competitors' products in your thing. Like, I can kind of see why that maybe isn't the way it's done. But outside of that space, it's all I can only see an upside to doing it. I think it connects us all together, and we sell each other's games that way. Probably, I'm sure people. I know I do. You flip through and see, like, I mean, like Apocalypse World, it credits Talislanta. You know, it's even going way back. So yeah, I love it. I think it's awesome, and I try not to draw those distinctions too much. Like, we're the indie people and they're not, and we're different. And I think we're all in it together. The hobby's small enough. We don't need to have those kind of divisions, but that is one key difference. The citing of other games is a thing. Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, the hobby's small, but it does seem to be growing, especially lately. And I think, and I'm not sure how much of that is like Twitch streamers and like people playing, like Critical Role on YouTube is probably guilty of a lot of new nerds who are rolling dice, which is awesome.
I don't have the numbers. I haven't done the research. But yes, it almost certainly is the Twitch effect, plus the ease of playing online with each other, which used to be a real pain in the butt, and still can be kind of a pain, but it's so much better than it used to be. And also the demystification of it to some degree, because there were some podcasts, there were some sort of live play recording stuff, but it didn't really have as much traction as some of the new stuff. And I think part of that is the simplification of it, you know, that to some degree Critical Role is tough because they're brilliant voice actors and they're incredible storytellers, and they have a very high bar, and it can be very intimidating from that point of view as a newcomer. Like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm as good as Matt Mercer. He's amazing or whatever. But from the other side of things, and this is true of Chris Perkins too, I think, the way they treat the game qua game of it, like, it's very light. There's a very light touch. And I think it's less intimidating from that angle. It's not just constantly doing math and looking up things in a table. And that was always kind of the stigma of our hobby, I think, was you have to learn all these rules and it's super complicated. And when you see people just sort of having fun and rolling dice, and as a game designer, it makes me cringe a lot because I'm like, oh God, play the game. But as a way to expand the hobby, I think it's helped a lot to demystify it, and just from personal experience, there's so many anecdotes I could share. I have a friend who went from never having played a role-playing game or even really seen one, watching some Critical Role and role play. I think the old role play, like Wes March's stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, a total of maybe 4 or 5 sessions. Watched them on Twitch and was like, I can do that. And then started running a campaign as the DM.
Nice.
Awesome.
Just bang. Like, didn't read the books yet. Just was like, oh yeah, it makes sense. I see what they're doing. I can do that.
Geronimo.
Yeah. And that changes. Like, I remember when we were kids, like, I'm in that generation that was too young to play with the first generation. They were all older guys when I was a kid, so they didn't want us in their games. So we didn't get to play with the original, like, oral tradition. We had to actually learn how to play D&D by reading Gary Gygax's
Mhm.
text, which is
Woof.
not a good way to learn anything. God bless him, that guy. What a jeez. And so it was
Blessed be
this
his
like
name.
cargo cult, like, I think this is what we're supposed to do. This is how we should supplicate the gaming gods. It says here that you do this. And
Oh my god.
the old timers would be like, what? No one does that. What are you talking about? So we
Returns
learned
to
through
setting.
trial and error, and
Mhm.
I think that created its own arm of the hobby leading up to Vampire and that kind of stuff, that
Yeah, I would agree.
everyone who kind of had to go their own way and figure it out for themselves. And now you can just watch people do it whenever you want and see exactly how they do it. It's so it's fantastic.
These days,
Yeah,
gotta
they're
be easy.
super lucky. Not only that,
I
but
used to have a D&D
today,
upfield both ways.
yeah. I was gonna say today you can not only can you get into the hobby easier, but you can like infinitely niche select your game.
Yeah.
You can be like, I want a game that's about 19th century servants in an English manor house that's like Downton Abbey, but also has magic. Like there's a role playing game for that. You can go and buy it and play it.
It's $15 on Drive-Thru RPG.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
Drive-through RPG.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
It really is.
So I mean, kind of on that thread, you had a thread on Twitter recently where you mentioned having played, I believe it was 246 different tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Is there anything you'd want to highlight again here, or anything that spoke to you deeply?
There are so many. I think in that recommendations thread, I recommended 70 maybe or something like that, 60 plus. That wasn't everything, but I started to feel like that was getting too long, so I made that Google Doc to kind of like shift everything over there. I will promote tomorrow is the first actually. Feature Friday is a new thing I'm doing on Twitter. Tomorrow's the first one. Exclusive.
Yeah,
Hot squeezies.
Making news.
we don't have art for this shit.
No, I should have told you. Yeah, I'm gonna do a Feature Friday on Twitter, and I will pick a designer to feature their games. Typically, new, like very current, up and coming or brand new stuff. Not usually old stuff, but nice.
It's backwards.
I showed up fine on my end.
Okay, good.
It was a valiant effort, Aaron.
So I will be doing that tomorrow. I'll be featuring an awesome designer tomorrow, and we'll be doing that every Friday, as well as expanding that list of recommendations as we go along. One that I will highlight, I was talking, Eric Lewandowski asked me about this the other day, and this is the other thing. Living in Seattle is just so crazy. Like everyone is, not everyone, but there's a really, really good community here, and we can be like, hey, let's meet up at the bar, and like all these awesome design people are just right there. So I'm blessed in that way. But he was talking about the list and games, and the thing that kept coming up was Talislanta. Because it's really weird. It's this like underground comic / psychedelic drug 70s thing. The creator, Steve Secchi, was a touring and studio musician who was probably under the influence of something or other at all times when he was working on that game. And that's really cool. It's a neat insight into that culture of the time. That's the D&D kind of was the Led Zeppelin kind of approach, and Talislanta was more the like weird prog rock kind of thing. But it is the game that had the 7 to 9 Apocalypse World outcome. Like that was the game. I don't know if it was the first necessarily. I don't know for sure, but it was the first in our culture there, meaning me and Vincent and other people that were gaming back then. The first time that we saw that in a game, and as soon as you have that tool, you can't ever go back, right? That's you cross a threshold, and pass fail rolls after that are just like no, we can't have that. There has to be that partial success, complicated success, whatever. So I always mention Talislanta. Out of that whole pantheon of games played, that one really felt like a sea change in how you approach a resolution system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sorry. I don't want to. I feel like I'm stepping on Aaron again. I'm sorry.
No, I was about to say that's one of the things that I've really liked about Blades and Dungeon World and other stuff that we've played is, sometimes when you're trying to get somebody who's not familiar with role-playing games into it, they feel like there's all this extra math involved, and it's kind of just a guessing game. It's like, all right, I rolled a 23. Is that good? I don't know what that is, because it's just this nebulous number that you can't see the other side of. And I think just having a definite, like, okay, 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, this is going to go bad for you. And then, like from there.
You're not sorry. You're never sorry.
When I'm the DM, I'm never sorry. But otherwise, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, gee, excuse me.
Kind of melding a couple of points that have been made so far. Actually, when you talk about Talos Lanta and how you sort of saw that and it was, revolutionary. It's interesting to me now that I think about it how ubiquitous access to literally every RPG that exists is. As someone who started going back to your other story about, I originally started. The only RPGs I had access to were in the weird stuff pile at the used bookstore at the town 30 miles over.
Yeah.
And so these were the only things I knew existed were these things.
Yeah.
And,
It's so good right now.
Yeah.
I was super lucky. I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, and it's a college town. UK is there. And my high school, or junior high and high school, civics teacher owned the local game store and was our Call of
Nice.
Cthulhu GM.
Ooh.
It's very lucky little like circumstance to be in.
Yeah.
My buddy Drew Curtis, he runs Fark.com, Fark,
Mm-hmm.
the news site. We always talk about that. It's called the Rusty Scabbard, and that was like we credit that place as both of us have these super nerdy careers now as adults, and without the Rusty Scabbard, I don't know if we would have even gotten into that. If we had to rely on the weird games depository, like I don't know. It was this gathering space for kids. There was game tables in the store to play there.
Awesome.
And our one of our English teachers had an after school D&D club and stuff like that. It was.
Nice.
I feel really, really lucky.
I now know what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah, right. Man, Mr. Four was the best. He did. We did mock trial for one segment for civics, and he ran it like a LARP, and it was this like crazy thing with hidden information and secrets revealed, and yeah, that was great.
Cool.
But so we were very lucky. We had exposure to more than we would have just going into the Rusty Scabbard. We'd see like something weird like Talos Lanta on the shelf, or Albedo or Space Master. There'd be some new weird thing in there. But now, geez, like everything, even stuff that came out back then that we couldn't get back then. Like now you can easily play Tunnels and Trolls.
I get lost on drive-through RPG sometimes. Like I could play this now. This is a thing that exists in my world.
And some of those are they're gems. Like Gangbusters it has this like half of a column on one page that basically explains troop style GM-less rotating cast gaming in like 2 paragraphs. Tom Mulvey wrote it. It's amazing. Awesome. It's like what if some of the players are FBI agents, some of the players are bootleggers, and someone else is like a DA, and someone else is the madam who runs the brothel, and there's no GM, and what if people just show up at game night and play different roles? And it has this little like description of that in 1980 or whenever that came out. It's
like the precursor to Fiasco almost.
It really is.
Yeah. But then you turn the page and it's like, each action segment is 0.1 seconds long. On your turn, choose 10 priorities for your action segment. Like, oh, God. Yeah.
We can only move ahead so fast. Sometimes we're held back by our technologies.
Mm-hmm. But I highly recommend it, especially to to designers out there. I think going back to the roots of the hobby is good. Whether you can do the deep dive and play the like hardcore old school dungeon crawl stuff, or the like kind of in between space 90s games, weird like Wraith, like bizarre stuff like that. It's all good. Even if you don't like it, it's good for your game designer. Judd Carlman talks about like cross training, like you're going to the gym and you're like working different machines.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I had kind of a question going back to Blades. You've got, a lot of mechanisms in place to kind of, to handle the pacing. You got clocks, you've got down times, you've got, the score and all the planning and everything. When you were kind of brainstorming the whole, the whole rule book, was that one of the foundational parts, or did that sort of come through playtesting, or how did you settle on what you ended up with?
That's a good question. There was about a 2-year playtest process before the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably the best playtest process I've ever had, in this particular way, having to do with the shape of the game, because we kind of intuitively knew what you needed to have. So the idea of these things as structural components, whatever, was there from the beginning. But and as we kept playing and refining, they got better and better and better. But I was always turning out sort of new player-facing materials and managing a lot of that to some degree on the GM side, and not exposing it as much. Like, we didn't start actually using clocks on the table for the first year, maybe or so, but I was using them, just because I use them in Apocalypse World and I was used to it. The idea of making them a game piece on the board that the players had access to and used in play, that was the thing that tipped it. Like, as soon as I started putting them on the table, everyone was like, "Oh, we should go back and do that other thing." Like, "Oh, well, obviously these should be on the table." That's the. So there was a lot of that. And then at the very 11th hour, like right before the Kickstarter, we were wrapping up a campaign, and I forget what I did. I did something as the GM, something like an entanglement. And that was not a mechanic. Like I just, I made entanglements happen because that was a good thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the players was like, how do you generate those? And I was like, oh no. Oh, right. Yeah. You need to, that's a thing in the game.
Turns out I can't run this for everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. There was a lot of that. The shape was pretty much there and it worked throughout. Including get into the score, do flashbacks as needed.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff was pretty much in place from the beginning, but then fleshing out how to explain it, what you actually do to produce the stuff. That went through many, 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 many revs through the whole process. But the shape of the game, I don't think it really changed much. There is one significant thing. There was only one crew originally. You were just a thieves guild. That was it.
Okay.
So that was a big change later on, where I decided to break it out into a bunch of different types of things.
The rivalries give you that real good
Yeah.
sauce.
Yeah. So that way you couldn't choose to be smugglers and then never smuggle anything.
Hi, that's us. We're guilty. Also, if you ever need playtesters in the future, we have a whole gaggle of nerds who are mostly literate and can roll things.
That's good.
I also want to point out that their bullshit skills are pretty good. On one session, they asked, "Can we count ripping that guy's head off smuggling because we grabbed it and then transported it elsewhere?" And that's a pretty compelling argument.
That's true. I mean,
from a certain point of view,
you surreptitiously transported a thing that you would have gotten in trouble if you
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I think they're right.
In my opinion, the blue coats are criminals.
Mhm. They definitely are. Yeah, that's coming out this year. The Blue Coat supplement.
That's awesome.
It's gonna be good. There's some fun. Speaking of like structure, the way that claims and wanted level and heat and all that and tier get reinterpreted when you're playing the cops. It's fun.
Ooh.
Cool.
I think it's going to be good. We'll have playtest stuff for that for groups who want to like pre-release playtest. So I'll keep you in the loop on that kind of stuff.
That would be awesome.
It's going to be good. Yeah, they're the worst. They're the worst.
They haven't met us yet.
Oh, excuse me. So this is kind of a vague, non-specific question, but do you have any like treasured gaming memories that like, you know, whenever anybody's coming up and sharing their things, like I punched a guy's soul out. Like, what's your thing?
Yeah, there are a lot. It's hard. The real formative years, the 10 to 19, like there's so many stories that are so meaningful, and if I told one right now, it would bore you to death and be like, that's stupid. But our Star Wars D6 campaigns were just super epic, and Shadowrun and all that. We had the great time. But part of that was just a bunch of insider, stuff and our own little gamer culture. In recent memory, I think the one that really stands out because it's so important. I know I've told the story before, but I was running Dungeons and Dragons originally, like Moldvay basic D&D at my workplace. Some people, and this was just before the Twitch phenomenon, so I should figure out why they cared all of a sudden. But people at my office who were not gamers, they were like, do the role playing thing for us, make that happen,
Make that numbers.
A thing.
Yeah. So we played Moldvay a couple 3 or 4 sessions, and I was slowly kind of like house ruling, and I kind of wanted them to feel like what it was like back then, that you had to sort of like create your own thing. And around the same time, Sage and Adam were about to launch the Kickstarter, and I was running the Dungeon World playtest for our local group with Sage. And during one of the sessions, I made some joke about, there should be this like jokey fake precursor to Dungeon World that's like the 70s game that you guys found in your uncle's attic or something. And Sage was like, oh yeah, you should make that. Let's put that on the Kickstarter. So I did that little 2-3 pager thing. And once I'd written it out, I was like, well, we should be playing this at the office. Like, this is obviously the right thing. So we switched from sort of classic D&D to World of Dungeons. And the players kind of didn't notice or care or anything, and it was fine. But that whole campaign culminated in Allison's character, Mike's character, and Keith's character standing at the gates of death of our Dungeon World campaign world. And Keith's character had been seduced by an evil wizard to destroy the gates of death forever so he could escape, his shadow could escape from the underworld. And so he tried to do that. And Mike's character kind of knew he was going to do that and had arranged to be standing next to him at all times to stop that from happening. And the gamer fun part of the story is Keith's wizard had 8 hit points, and Mike's character had a 2d6 armor piercing attack that he could produce.
Oh, good.
For various reasons. Well, he was a devotee of Satara the Sea Demon and stuff. But anyway, he wins the initiative roll. He attacks Keith's character. He rolls his 2d6 damage, and he does 7 points of damage on 2d6. So Keith, he has 1 hit point. It's his turn, and he activates the magic item that the Shadow Wizard arranged to have him get to destroy the gates of death.
Oh, good.
So he did, and all that, shit happened after that.
And now we have blades.
And now we have blades. Exactly. We went home that night and everyone was like, wow, that was crazy. We destroyed the world. And it was the rotating cast office game. So like people were going to show up next week. Like, what did you guys do last time? You know? So I sent out an email and it was like, what do you guys want to do? Do you want to play out the apocalypse? Do you want to play during the destruction of the world, this like crazy thing that's happening? Or do you want to like fast forward 1,000 years and play in the new world that has been created after that? They said 1,000 years. So yeah, that's where Blades comes from. But also it's that classic gamer thing of we're telling stories together. Everything is this collaborative fiction thing we always talk about, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, you rolled a 7, not an 8, man. So he destroys the world. Sorry.
Yep.
Like that's just how it is. That's why we play the game. That's why we don't just make it up. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We were all laughing pretty hard because Aaron actually runs a drop-in, drop-out Dungeon World campaign where there are a dozen or so players that all sort of randomly get assigned slots every week. And at the very end of last season, while some of us were out of town, they essentially ended the world, and we didn't find out about it until we got back.
They turned a holy lake into blood. They broke the seals. They let things that are immune to death out. Some ancient unspeakable entity came back, and I just kind of sat back and watched the Discord chats. They were like, "How'd the last session go?" And they were like, it was fine."
Why isn't there a journal entry describing what happened for everybody?
It was fine. It was all fine.
Experiences you don't think are universal.
Yeah.
Someone in chat said they want their Blades campaign to be about bringing back the sun. That was the first playtest campaign for Blades. The end of that campaign was restoring the sun back to the world.
I was about to say I have a subtitle for you if you're making a book out of it. It says it's daylight saving time. Once again, I regret nothing.
Their royalty check is in the mail.
Yes.
Nice. All right. I had a question. I watched some of your in preparation for this whole event. I went on your YouTube channel and I stalked you a little bit on YouTube. And I watched one of your videos that was a reply to a video that Matt Colville had made. So I then had to go watch that. Then I watched yours. It was about losing characters, essentially. And Matt Colville tends to approach it from a very, I feel, at least a fairly D&D centric standpoint. So he's looking at it from that specific angle.
Yes.
And you talked about it. And I feel like you maybe are coming at it from a slightly different angle, though you're still sort of framing it in his discussion.
Yeah.
I feel like I personally have really, over the course of like my gaming career, which is a weird thing to say, but I have definitely changed my outlooks on losing characters. And in your talk, you specifically talked about how, well, if it serves the story, it's about telling the story, right? And to me, where I'm at now, and I kind of want to get your feedback on this. Like now, losing characters it doesn't necessarily, even if it doesn't inform that story, which it totally does, right? But it informs my story because that's a story I get to tell. And if I'm with these people when I lose that character, that's a story we all get to tell over and over again.
Yeah.
And I feel like that to me is sort of a microcosm of the shared gaming experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not, just because of life being the way it is for me, I have moved every 3 years since I was like 19.
Wow.
And so I've never had an actual like long-term gaming group. This is the one, like almost the longest I've ever run a game with somebody or been in games with people. So it's really interesting to me to be witness to and now part of those like shared stories that we've all experienced. And is that a thing that you think about when you design games?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important, like in the broad sense. We should touch on the topic of that video a little bit, but like in the general sense of game design, I think the scope and engagement and sort of arc of play is something that a designer should consider when you're working on your project, right? It's very different making Fiasco versus Torchbearer or they both can do one shots and they can both do campaigns, kinda. Fiasco sort of can, but that's a key decision point, and also that informs setting expectations for the players, right? Should you expect to play this character over a long period of time? Should you expect to play them over a very short period of time? Should you expect that to be at stake? The length of time you play your character, is that at stake or not? And all of those things go into game design. Not necessarily having to pick one and focus on one thing. That's one way to do it. But just thinking about it in general, what does my game serve? How do I do that? Like with Blades, for instance, Blades has a point of view, which is you can't be killed. The game can't really kill you. It can just make things progressively worse and worse and worse and worse. But if you don't want to die, you can always survive whatever it is and have to wake up tomorrow in the new bad situation and continue dealing with the shitty thing. Or you can be like, you know what? That stab to the heart. Yeah, you got me. I died. I'm going to make a new guy. I'm out. I've had enough. So it's very player controlled. But that dial, I think, is super important. The most important thing, maybe I said this in the video too, I don't know, but it all comes back to expectations, right? If we're on the same page, then we can play in any mode at all. And there's this kind of unfortunate like internet wisdom sometimes among gamers that like this type of gaming is legit and this isn't, and this is the way you should do it, and that GM should never kill a PC, and like all these very black and white kind of things. Instead, it's just let's all like agree provisionally, not like permanently forever and ever, but just like for now, like are you guys cool with this? Yes, we are, and we have that enthusiastic consent, I think, is a good term for that, right? We're all like, yeah, and we're paying lip service. We're not like, yeah, it's okay if you kill my character, but I really don't want you to, and I'm not going to say that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I think there's ways to create that at the game table aside from just like the old school Forge method, which was really innovative at the time, was have a social contract before you start playing. Talk about all these things and get buy-in. Do you want this in the game? Yes or no? Should we have this? Yes or no? Unfortunately, people don't really work that way. They'll say yes when they mean something else, and there's social pressure to conform, and like weird stuff happens. If instead you have this an atmosphere of the game itself advertises these qualities. So when we all say, "Oh, I can't wait to play Torchbearer," we're sort of signaling like, "Yeah, let's do it. Like, turn the screws. Let's do it." Just by choosing to play that game, or Fiasco or whatever. And then you get into these nebulous gray areas. Like if we all go, "Yeah, let's play D&D," we could all have very different ideas about what it means for our PCs and for the story and da 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 da. So we have to fall back on those older tools of, yes, it's D&D, but it's a gritty game where death is on the line, and there's low magic, and it's going to be set in these 3 cities on the coast, and the undead threat is a thing, and like you have to create your design doc as the GM. You have to step in and sort of take the game across the finish line from where it is. And the other element of that video was this idea of kind of low stakes. I think that helps a lot. If it's okay to mess it up, instead of it being like, "Oh, you killed my PC. This game's the worst. I'm never coming back. You're a bad GM." Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
If the stakes are super low, like, "Oh, I'm really disappointed in how that happened. I wanted to keep playing that character," and we go, "Okay, that's fine. Like let's just make it work out, or whatever."
find a cleric or
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it could
dodge
be
to
really
the last
fun.
second and you're unconscious or whatever. Yeah.
That's something I love about classic D&D, actually. Like, you can play that hardcore no take back 0 hit point death thing, and you can also be like, you can go on a quest to resurrect your fallen comrade, and like, that's awesome. That's why in so many forum posts it's like how to avoid the total party kill and make sure your encounters are balanced exactly, da 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 da. And I'm always like, but the resurrection quest is so fun. Like, but just have that in the game. You know, I don't know. There's so many layers to that. We could have a long talk about that.
We could. I will say this. It is very interesting and cool to think back and realize that even back in the day, like way back in the day, like the foundational documents of the hobby, that this was a known issue, and so
Big time.
there were groups who were like, "Yeah, we'll do the resurrection quest," and there's groups like, "Nope, that thief's dead."
Yeah,
Dead.
yeah. There's a really good video on Matt Colville's channel. He interviewed his GMing mentor, who's like super old school, like first generation D&D GM, for like 2 or 3 hours. This interview.
Wow.
And he breaks it all down, like how they played, the culture of play, how they got groups together, what books they were using, the whole 9 yards. And the real standout thing for me from that talk is it was rotating cast, pick up and play. You would take your character sheet to someone's game that week and be like, I'm playing in your game tonight. Here's my guy. And they would kind of look it over and be like, okay, this is all right. And that's why in Dragon Magazine back then, there were all these articles about like, don't give out treasure like this, or don't give them too much stuff because they're going to take that to someone else's game and be like, wait, you have a flying carpet and a ring of wishes? And wait, whoa.
How many decks of many things?
But that portability aspect and like taking it to different groups, kind of like a pickup basketball league or something like that.
Yeah.
It's such a cool idea. I've never been involved in something quite like that, but it explains a lot of where that stuff comes from. And getting killed in Brian's game on Wednesday, you come back to Jerry's game on Friday and you're like, I need to resurrect my dude, everybody. Like, can we do the quest for the thing? Yeah.
Excuse me. Do any of y'all have any more questions you could think of?
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this one, but I think it was on your website or your blog, but you talked about one of the you design games that require little prep. And first, I wanted to say, as someone with a career, thank you. And second, I mean, how much of that is like is part of that such that the storytelling is more urgent and less like the GM has planned, if not all the connective tissue, at least a bunch of nodes?
Like how much is the low prep stuff intentional as a design goal, or
as a design goal, or even like just specifically the narrative that you're trying to encourage with your game? Like, are you trying to encourage like a specific behavior of players through low prep, or is the low prep more just so it's easier to hit the ground running?
Oh, that's a really interesting question.
Thank you.
Well done, Ed.
I have to let me think about that.
He's got to go to his black and white thinking corner.
I would love it now if like suddenly like from his head it expanded out. It's like the Wizard of Oz.
I'm just trying to think of what music would go along with the black and white thinking corner.
It's probably everything's Nico Case, right? Or Tom Waits, probably Tom Waits.
Tom Waits.
Yeah, man, that's such a good question. But before you clarified, I was gonna of course, like the low prep thing is, like for our circumstances as people with not a lot of time and hard to get game groups together. You can't play for 30 sessions. But how does that change the way you interface with the game itself? Like, how does that? I think it goes hand in hand with the high momentum, low drag, genre based, hold on lightly mentality, like this very like forward thrusting, running away from the giant boulder kind of thing. Because that's the type of fiction that I love. I like Flash Gordon serials and Indiana Jones and Star Wars and stuff. And those are all pulp at some level, and they're all in medias res to some degree usually, and a lot of that stuff is part and parcel with it. Even if sometimes I go a little further afield, it's still kind of in that space. And I think you've touched on something really smart there, that there is a kind of, there's a connection. It's not just convenient to have a low prep game. It actually does
Serve
kind
a
of
purpose.
Yeah, it like pushes the players and the GM towards a snappier, less worrisome, less nitpicky kind of mode, maybe. I think, yeah.
Yeah, it also might encourage more just kind of collaboration, really, if you don't already have this whole interaction planned out.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think some of my favorite moments running Blades has been when I pitch a devil's bargain,
Mm.
and then another player says, "No, I can do better." And then I just sort of sit back and, yeah, no, that is better. Yes.
Sorry, I thought you said devil's bargain.
Yeah.
Let me show you what I got.
If you've seen Bloodletters at all, you know that Strauch is the master of the self devil's bargain, to the point where it's not even part of the discussion of the devil's bargain. Like, it's just part of his action that he's described. And we get to going through the dice and picking devil's bargains, and everyone kind of goes, I can't really think of one, because it's already the thing you're doing. You should take the die for it, because you've already
done the thing.
It's just every single action you describe includes how it's really bad for you.
You're already embracing the worst possible universe that this could exist in.
Yeah.
Matt in chat says, "Hold my poison chalice."
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It does go to the collaboration thing. If it is very low prep and the setting is sketchy and the game is telling us to get into the action as fast as possible, there is a bit of a pressure on me as the GM to say, why are you guys here? You know, what, you're in Bajo Baz's office. He says you're either with me or against me. And we can just start there, and then I can pull the group. Like, why are you really here? Are you secretly here to assassinate him?
Andrew,
what's going on?
Well, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I did start season 1 with, I've got a question for each of you. Where are you? Who are you robbing? When did that alarm start going off? And whose fault was it? And the first person answered said, "Oh, it was definitely my fault."
Man, you know you got a good group at that point. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sean Nittner does just tell us what your blade is like and the last time you used it and why.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
Really
Writes
good.
that down.
That's a very good technique. And also, I've seen the most self-satisfied look I always see is the person who is not the fighter type. And when they get that question, they're like, "Oh well, I don't have a blade," and they get to, like, they feel so superior, you know, like, well, yes, you guys all talked about your stupid blades. I'm above all of that.
I'm the spider.
Let me tell you over the last time I used my quill.
Yeah. It was held by someone who didn't know they were working for me.
Oh.
Oh, man.
I think it's really interesting, because speaking as someone who's run more D&D than I care to remember, I know that as I've sort of gotten older and did less prep work with my games, I also, and this speaks to a really bad instinct, but I got less possessive over how the story went and how things evolved.
Mhm.
Not just to the collaboration method, but just like, this is the thing that I planned for. This is what we're doing, right? But if there's low prep and it's low in time investment on my part, oh well, that's the thing that happened over there. Especially with Blades or a or a Apocalypse World sort of thing, where if I have to come up with like statistics or mechanical information for the bad guys, the opposition, it's not very detailed. I don't have to
Yeah.
think very hard about it. That's really
So nice.
liberating as a game runner. I really enjoyed running Blades, in part because I'm just like, that's a punk, that guy's nothing, that's a demon, that's a problem, and
Yeah.
these two things, there's a gradient between them. And sort of going back to the original, I have a question. I have two questions. Well, I have one compliment and one question. So,
Go on.
The engagement roll mechanic
Yeah.
is amazing. It is
Right.
the thing
Yeah.
that I have always wanted
Good.
as a player or as a GM. What, like running Shadowrun, running any D&D that happens outside the dungeon, running any where it's like, okay, we did the plan. We don't know the plan, but we did the plan. Can we not talk about this for an hour and a half and just do the thing?
Oh god, the amount of time that those engagement rolls saved.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I mean, that's just self-defense, right? I ran a lot of Shadowrun, and good lord, the pace of that game. I love. Don't get me wrong, I love Shadowrun. I love it, but
I know.
I
I have 3 editions of Shadowrun over there.
Yeah.
I'm really waiting for the Genesis hack of Shadowrun.
Yeah. And then in Stars Without Number too, actually, even as recently as like, because a year or two before Blades, but I ran this really long couple year Stars Without Number campaign, and there were the occasional like killing or heist or something, and for one assassination, we had 2 sessions of just like in a room with diagrams and figuring out how to. It was actually fun, to be honest, but
yeah.
But it's not conducive to any kind of pace where you're doing that every week, right? That's a nightmare.
No.
So for the regiment, Paul Riddle and I are working on this game, this World War II, the original version, World War II battle game, Apocalypse World powered game. And it was kind of like both of us were sort of enthusiasts of that era and military games, ASL and that kind of stuff. And we love the fiction in that space, and we wanted to emulate it to some degree. So we ended up building this game that did it pretty well, but it fell into this trap of things are so high stakes and so deadly, and where you're standing and who goes first and why and what you can see and all that like is determining who lives and who dies in this really hardcore way. The game system kind of didn't matter after the GM described the situation you were in. You lived or died based on that description, more or less.
Yeah.
And once we realized that, we were like, well, that's a problem. Like, why engage all these systems when the starting conditions of the battle are so important? So we came up with engagement rules for that, and I wasn't running it at the time. Paul decided to run the whole airborne campaign from D-Day through Normandy, through Belgium, just the whole thing, as a regiment campaign. And his blog posts about it are fantastic if you want to read awesome military fiction. Enigma Machinations is his blog, and he recorded the entire campaign. It's fantastic. But it was like a patch. I sketched it out, like, here's a way to do it. Here's how to do this engagement problem, and passed it off to him. And then he used that through the campaign. And it was like, immediately he was like, oh my God, this is good. Yes, we have to make this work better. Because the initial obvious first problem is it's so important. Now we need to stress about the engagement roll, and it has to be like so critical, and the outcome decides the fate of everyone. So we spend an hour debating what goes into the engagement roll.
I love that bit of drama where you say, like, so you get 1 die for it being a bold or daring plan. Like, just it's a 30-second stretch that feels like it takes minutes in the best way possible.
Yeah, that was a last minute addition. That particular die. Because I finally just realized like, oh, this is what I want. I should just give you a die. Why like make it all like weird and subtle in the game? Just tell them up front.
Yeah, give the rest give the rest the prize when they push that button, man. Like,
yeah,
I want you to be crazy and daring. Go be crazy.
But then the thing that really made it work, honestly, like there's a lot of ways to do engagement roles, and I think a lot of games benefit from that concept. But with Blades, backing it all the way out to it's just your starting position. It matters, and it cuts out a lot of bullshit. But then, I'm sorry, can we swear on this? I didn't.
Totally. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, sorry,
constantly.
I forgot to ask. It cuts out a lot of bullshit. But then it carried too much weight, and then it turned into a planning for the engagement role.
Yeah.
So now the worst it can hurt you is that you're in a desperate position, which gives you XP.
Exactly.
So there's your little engine of like, you should care about this, but if you don't care, it's kind of good for you. So I
want to kind of loop back to the 3 questions, because you did ask us what our thoughts were, and I just want to point out that like I really do like getting XP for even attempting a desperate roll. Like, doesn't matter pass or fail. Yes. You are in a shitty position. You are probably learning from this, because maybe you're just learning never to do this again in a very burn after reading way. But yeah, I that bit of like that part of the third, like the answer to the third question, I think is inspired design.
Yeah.
It's important, you know, it's the, and again, just like the whole Blades philosophy, it's the bluntest instrument, right? I want you to do this, so I will give you XP for it.
Exactly.
It's like extremely straightforward, dumb way of handling it, but it solves that problem, because the desperate roll is not a good deal, right?
No.
It's everything that isn't a 6 is very bad for you.
Really not.
And you should try to avoid that as much as possible. Never make a desperate roll, because it's just bad. Even on a 4-5, you can die. You know? Like it's you can do the thing, but you die.
He impales you through the spine. But
yeah.
If the door's open, congratulations.
But you do ineffectually scratch him with your knife. So, good job.
I think,
Yeah, so having that XP thing, and then the initial problem right out of the gate was, oh, this is not going to work, because people are going to mine this. There's no limit on it. You can get as much XP as you want. It's going to be this runaway train of whatever. And I was like, you know what? Let's just see. It's like, oh no, what if you have a game group that tries to game desperate rolls? Ooh, that would be terrible. You know?
They would create so much drama. It would be terrible. Yeah.
What if they just go out and be awesome all the time in my game?
Just keep rolling 6s. I mean, that's all you got to do to win. Just always roll 6s and you're fine.
Yeah. I've gotten to run one Blades game, and I've gotten to play in one Blades game.
Campaign,
yeah, sorry. In one season, as we call them, of Blades. I think my character made maybe 3 rolls the entire time that weren't desperate rolls.
Yeah.
I respond to incentives very strongly, apparently.
I do too, and I'm a min-maxer, not so much in role-playing, but in every other game. I optimize, and the shortest, my guards shouldn't have a long path to walk in Prison Architect. I got to fix that, because it's everything is super optimized. But in a game like Blades, like there is an incentive, and there is a reason to do it, and the XP is good, but also like XP and getting more stuff it doesn't matter that much. You can still roll a 3. It helps, and it's good, and it's nice to have that extra die and whatever. But on a long enough timeline, everyone critical moment eventually. So yeah.
I think our last session of season 2 of my campaign, the episode title is 33313. because that's what our hound rolled on a desperate snipe or hunt. Yeah,
it's so bad. Distracted Elf, she was playing a whisper, and it was like, I don't know, a year ago or something now, but I got the screenshot on Twitter from her, like, yeah, like quoting the book, like most rolls have a 50% chance of success. It was like 6 dice of a tune, the 3, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, and this was like, do it or get possessed by the monster forever. Yeah.
Nice.
And she does excellent faces too.
Oh man,
Oh,
she
that's
does.
got to be a lovely screenshot.
Yeah, she does.
she's an amazing gamer. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and that just goes back to the setting expectations idea that we were talking about before, right? You want this vibe that we're having right now. Everybody's laughing. We're having a good time talking about the worst things that ever happened to our characters. It's not because we don't care. We're trying. We're trying to avoid those things. We're trying to give them their best lives.
Yeah.
But when they face the worst moments, it's like a combination of sympathy for them, but also like the glee from this is going to be really fun to play. Like we love it when a character struggles, and like I always talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark because for obvious reasons, but it's like a perfect movie. But Indy fails every single role in that, like basically every role in that movie. He ends up tied to a stake by the villains while they enact their master plan. Like he loses the whole thing. And every minute of it is super exciting. We love it. We think he's awesome and cool. We don't think he's a buffoon. Yeah, it's that roller coaster snowball effect or whatever it is it's just good for that type of fiction. And I think that's the type of fiction, like you mentioned earlier, like that's the type of fiction that I want to design for, I think, primarily.
Yeah, I think the way that you set individual character stakes in Blades is very good too, because you can always make that last defense roll. Always.
Yeah.
There's just a very high likelihood you're going to be slightly more broken as a person afterwards.
Yeah, and that's another wonderful feeling, right? You again, geez, I'm breaking my own rule. I'm telling you why my game is cool.
That's why you're
bad.
here, man.
It's bad.
That's definitely part of why you're here.
Yeah.
It speaks for itself. However, no, I forget who, one of the playtesters, probably Dylan Green, or Ryan Dunleavy, one of the two, I would credit with this, that discovery of the joy of being able to just say no. And Strauss like canonized it on the Bloodletters, that going nope like on camera whenever the resistance roll came up. There's something, it's just so, it feels so good as a player to know you get down to the last thing, you fail and fail and fail, the demon has you and they're sucking the soul out of your body and you're like, actually, you can't do that. I'm a Blades PC. I can just stop that. I can just say that doesn't happen. I don't care. You're the demon lord of hell, whatever. Nope, doesn't work.
And I'm going to pay for it.
Yeah.
But I can
pay for it.
Yeah.
As long as I'm willing to pay the price, I can stop anything. And it means as a tier 0 crew, you can go, you know what we should do? We should take out the unseen. That's what we should do.
We should kill the Pope.
Yeah. You're not here to kill the Pope, are you?
We're not actually Blades PCs, so it wouldn't work.
Yeah, when they come for us, when they burn down our lair and they take everything away from us and they murder our friends, and we can say no until we burn ourselves out. But we're not actually the underdogs. The Blades PCs, they're secret underdogs. You get to feel like an underdog because the game goes, oh, boo-hoo, you're a tier 0 crew and you have limited effect and you're not worth anything. But the rest of the setting should just be filled with terror that there are PCs in the setting now, because they can't stop you. If you target them and decide to take them out, you're going to just death march your way through their forces. And ruin your own lives doing it. But there's something really fun about that dynamic.
That's pretty cool. I will say, when I first started running Blades, I didn't get that, I think, and I came to understand it and embrace it, but I was coming from a different place apparently, and had a hard time. Once I got that you show them the terrible thing and you make them run from it, you make them stop it. That was a major breakthrough for me. I also came to the same conclusion you did, and in my game, it turned out it took a PC to stop a PC, or one PC to stop two other PCs, as it were, who were trying to stop each other.
That guy was
It's very
basically
strange.
made of bombs, and it was bullshit. I just want to say that.
That's the other dirty little secret, though. I think you hit on it. And this happened in our playtest games, local games. The inter crew stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not automatically what the game is about, right? You can be totally external facing, and that's fine. But you can make that discovery. It happens in Apocalypse World a lot too, where you realize, oh, the people who really matter in my character's life are the other PCs, and if we're not all on the same page, I got real problems now because there's nothing worse than a PC. Forget demons, forget all that. Like PCs are the real problems. It started to happen in roleplay Blades as well.
Yeah.
And what I love about that is the questions of loyalty and friendship and common interest they can be glossed over a lot of times, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but in this, when they come up in Apocalypse World or Blades or Burning Wheel, it matters, and you can be in this situation of I'm doing everything right. I've optimized my build and whatever, but the other three players are against me, and now I'm just completely screwed. And that's the both long Burning Wheel games I played were all about that. And I think that snuck its way in as a little seed in Blades, that the crew is arguably the most interesting thing.
It's got the most dynamics in play.
Yeah.
And I feel like because the rest of the game does such a good job of making you feel like these criminals, these like borderline petty, but also sort of super powered criminals, that eventually you do turn to your left and you're like, that person is actually the threat. What am I going to do about that?
Or my biggest obstacle.
Yeah. The Whisper playbook is kind of designed around that. We
wouldn't know anything about that.
I think everyone has this experience. I'm pretty sure.
I'm feeling very attacked right now.
More or less than when I said, in response, I shoot you 7 times.
There was a discussion among, I forget when it happened. It might have been with Sean Nittner, but there was some discussion about, have you looked at all of the friends and contacts? Do you know that the Whisper is super broken and just like not like the others? And I'm like, yeah. The Whisper's friends list is like way too good. But also their abilities are better too. Yeah. Yep. They definitely are. Okay, cool. All right. That's what we're doing.
I think
and part of that is it's like the Brainer in Apocalypse World. It's the same thing. They're just trouble. They're just super trouble, and balancing them down to fit into the party or whatever. It makes sense in a certain type of game design, but just like with the Brainer or the Skinner, arguably worse in Apocalypse World. You want that outlier, that character. The Spider's kind of like that too. That's just. They just start on a different playing field. You're like, yeah, I got some knives, and my friend's a bounty hunter, and they're like, my best friend's a demon, and I can summon ghosts. And okay, great, you're a problem.
Yes,
that's the thing that kind of works so well for the campaign we did where I was the Trouble Whisper is when things went well. So I was a demon lawyer who knew magic, and basically when we broke into a place, I had a contract, and if you signed over your entire building to us, we wouldn't kill you.
Big air quotes around that whole thing.
Yeah.
Kill you?
But
No.
but like the thing was, when things go well, the Whisper is great, and when things go bad, when
The
you start
Whisper is
rolling
great.
2s and 3s,
When,
the Whisper is a big fucking problem.
when things go bad, we get Demon Grandma Bartender. Is what happens, and it wrecks everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the trouble magnet.
Mhm.
They have power, but it's at a cost, right?
Yeah.
Sean's reminded me
Yeah.
in chat. Yes, it was at GoPlay. That's right, late night at GoPlay. Should the Whisper's friends list change?
I feel like because Aaron runs, like I said, that that Dungeon World game, and in her Dungeon World game, my character has a massive distaste for wizards that has been earned, and I feel like same deal in that setting. Wizards are a huge problem. They're drama sources. And
Yeah, I think that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
the ideal thing. World of Dungeons does this, and the old basic roleplay Elric was the first time I encountered it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
that idea of, oh, you want power. Sorcerer does this super well too. You can have power. You can have as much power as you want, and that amount of power is how troublesome it is.
Yeah.
So just pick your poison. You know, if you want a super powerful demon in sorcerer that's 9 dice worth of kicking ass, you got to make a ritual roll against 9 dice to summon it, and every failure is conditions you don't want. And there's a Burning Wheel magic pack that's like that also. And it's like it's a lazy game designer out to some degree also. I can write rituals and stuff without having to build this really intricate, balanced subsystem. I can just say, look, you can have whatever you want as a ritual or as magic, but you got to negotiate with the powers that be. You have to get into a relationship with entities that do not have your best interests at heart. And the GM is going to play those characters, and they are going to try to ruin your life. So go ahead, do whatever you want, but it's like a role-playing problem. It's kind of like any other game. We focus on it because it's magic. As gamers, we want magic to be more scientific or more kind of like rote. But if you take it out of the magic space, it's just like a first level D&D character saying, you know what, I want my local knight and his garrison of troops to work for me. And you go, okay, what? How are you going to do that? Like, go, okay, like try to make a deal, you know?
How's your estate management skill?
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of promises and bargains are you going to have to make to get that in motion?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think one of my favorite things about the Wisp, like those sorts of mechanics, is that Vetra, Aaron's character, made that decision every time. Like every time you try to do the thing, you have to like re-up your commitment to everything burning down if this goes bad. And so everyone at the table watches you do it, and a bunch of them are going to make eye contact.
Yeah. Like, seriously? You're going to... We're not cool with that.
You just promised how many souls? 1, 2, 3.
In the Bloodletter series, we had the opposite thing where Sean and Adam both decided to just live in denial, basically. And we're like, we don't know what you're doing. So when you're off making demon packs and like throwing lightning bolts or whatever, like we don't see you do any of that stuff. So we just can be like, Oscar, where were you? Like, why didn't you help us in that fight? You know? He's like, oh yeah, sorry.
Never mind the hurricane outside.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a natural human response, though. Eventually, you just shut down. You're like, I don't want to know.
Yeah, it's better just don't tell us.
Yeah, how the demon sausage is made. Just keep it over there. As long as it's tasty, we're fine.
A lot of orphans in that sausage.
There were.
Yeah.
You guys specifically burnt down an orphanarium. It happened. I watched it.
It does break down over time. You can't be in denial when they're putting up your enemies' bodies on hooks and draining their blood into a basin. Like during the fight isn't over yet, and they're already like ritually carving a guy. Like, Yeah.
Now I'm just
that's-
imagining the lurk like walking down to the basement of the guild hall and throwing open a door, like to go get like some bread or something off the larder, and just like suddenly looks up from a book and there's just like bodies hanging, and the Whisper standing in the middle. Just,
Super guilty.
Oh man, my friend Phil is in chat. I just noticed Phil Rose. He played Claire Tremont, the psychic, in our long running. We played in Polygon magazine. There was a like Pulp D20 supplement that they published in the magazine.
Okay,
and
yeah.
Tony Dowler ran that for us. We played we played like 13 sessions of that, and then Spirit of the Century, and then Shadow of Yesterday, and then something else. This long running pulp thing.
Oh, okay.
It was super fun. Same characters, but different systems.
Yeah.
And Phil played the psychic Claire Tremont, who was marooned on Mars. And I think, Phil, probably this was a seed in my mind for Whispers in Blades.
Nice.
She had psychic powers, and the Thought Lords had these mysterious towers, and they could control populations. And she was like, I want to commune with the Thought Lords. That's what I should do. Or like, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thought Lords is a really good name for just like
Yeah.
anything.
Thought Lords of
Yeah.
Mars.
Thought Lords of Mars. Yeah.
Coming out this year.
Looking for it. Looking for it.
There's a version on my Patreon now, but I wrote it just before Blades. It's like this weird proto Blade system that doesn't quite work right.
Oh. Okay.
And since Blades has come out, I went back and looked at it and was like, you know what, this needs a new version. So
Nice.
it'll be coming out. But yeah, Phil's character Claire, maybe the first Whisper, technically. I think.
The first Whisper being marooned on Mars makes a
Yeah.
difference then.
I like it.
Things make so much more sense now.
Yeah.
Did anybody have anything else, or?
Oh, I could ask questions all night, but
I don't have a time limit. You guys probably do, but if you have more questions, I'm happy to answer them. That's fine.
one of the first one that comes to mind, Devil's Bargains. We talked about them a little bit earlier. When did that morph from you just being like, this thing, to an actual mechanic?
Yeah. That I remember it distinctly because it was at the very end of the local playtest group. We played, it was about 2 years of games, and like vanilla Blades in the setting of Duskwall, and then some other experiments in different types of settings with different types of characters, and to see how the systems kind of held up if the magic and fantasy stuff wasn't part of it. But sometime during the end of that, and I had done this, Dylan Green, the playtester, he was in my Stars Without Numbers game as well. And there's this kind of, it's not a bonus die like Devil's Bargain, but there was always this like, oh, you want to convince him? That's probably like, I don't know, it's like DC 13. Although, if you promise to give him a cut, it's like 7. Or whatever. There was always this thing.
Yeah.
There was always this thing that came in. Or he's going to tell his allies about your plan before you do it. And that'll lower your DC. Or whatever. And then in the Blades game, there was always this like, well, I'll give you a bonus die because basically you promised to take care of her sister. So, and that kept happening and happening and happening.
Okay.
And I wasn't aware of it. And at the end of this long series, it happened in one session. Ryan's character did a thing, and I was like, you can get a bonus die if you like spill the beans about your other project. And Dylan was like, okay, this has to be a mechanic. I can't take it anymore. This has to be a mechanic. So yeah, it was in play for a long time without anyone noticing it, and Dylan just stamped it. And then it took a while to name it, actually. Devil's Bargain was the right thing, kind of.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is like not a Christian kind of thing, and the idea of the devil is so kind of Christian focused, and I don't want to have that in my setting. So I cheated by going the other way. Like every evil creature is called a devil in this world. That's their name for it. So now it makes sense.
Nice.
because it was the right name for that thing.
Yeah, it's very evocative in what it says about that mechanic.
Yeah.
That's
I-
cool.
I think it also sort of introduces a bit of space in that moment between the player and the character.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah. I think that's super important.
Yeah.
And also opening space in the group space as well.
Yeah.
Things you might not be aware of as the player necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Things the GM might not be paying attention to, but someone else at the table is like, you've actually been kind of tiptoeing around this thing for a while now. What if you committed now? And everyone goes, oh yeah, I never. It's nice. It's a nice little. It's that soft space between the mushy story game thing where we're like, oh, we're just gonna like tell a story together and it'll be really cool and chill and we'll get high and whatever.
As you do.
Sorry, I'm being way too mean there. I have a problem with that kind of thing. Like I think authority divisions in games are good, and you want to have some kind of space where you don't have to worry about stuff. And as a player, it bothers me when the GM's like, you go into the room, what's it look like? I'm not into that personally. That's just a personal preference. That's not a.
Oh yeah.
It's a bridge too far.
But that soft space of Devil's Bargain lets you kind of like bring in that type of collaboration that's a little bit outside the normal space. And Andrew Shields actually, when I was doing the list of Devil's Bargains in the book, they were originally that like you take heat, it costs coin, you lose an item, the simple list.
Yeah.
And there's a second set on that page, the bottom part of that page is from Andrew, who was like, actually, when I play Blades, like these can be all kinds of things. They can be revelations about your past, and you actually betrayed him back then, and now he knows it was you, and like, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that we do that too. That's a good point. That we should have this little sort of sidebar almost that says, if you want to get weird and you want to get into the collaborative storytelling space, Devil's Bargains are a fun way to do it without stepping on anyone's toes, because you can just say, nah, I don't want that. I don't want that to die. It's like, whatever. But it goes back to, I didn't say this before actually, because I was avoiding answering your question. One of the things you do in Blades as a player is GM training wheels. There are certain activities you have to do as a player in Blades that you do when you GM other games. And so part of the Blades secret little manifesto is being a player in Blades makes it easier to GM because you secretly work on these little skills, and the Devil's Bargain is part of that. The other part is like you have to say what action you're rolling, which is a GM thing in every other game. So there's little bits like that seeded throughout the game to kind of train up a GM mindset for people who traditionally don't GM.
Yeah, I'll go back to the other thing in a second, but that point specifically, the educational term for that is scaffolding, and it is it's one of the things I was very impressed with when I read the book. Not just in those specific instances, I think, but the whole book itself. If you read it as a player, I think does a very good job of sort of laying out what expectations are, what you should be thinking about. And those things then can generalize very easily into the next step to being a game runner. Yeah.
There's a cost though. There's a 7 to 9 on that. Presenting the book that way, it can be difficult for some readers. It can be clunky. It can be like too technical sometimes, or awkward as opposed to your normal game read. And that was a very conscious decision we had to make in the editing phase with Karen.
Yeah.
Like, what order should things be in? What are our priorities? What do we really care about? And making the call to say like, yeah, we want this, that matters to us, and we want that to be a thing. and we have to just let it go. And some people are not gonna dig it, and it's gonna hit them weird.
Huh.
But can't have everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you make editing decisions, I guess.
Yeah.
You got to make those calls one way or the other.
There's a funny one. I had this Twitter exchange with this really cool person who was not an ass about it at all, but they said like the order of reading the book was annoying to me because I like character creation earlier on.
Oh yeah,
like pretty much every game does for good reasons.
Mhm.
And when I didn't get that, like it felt like a slog to get through the book, and there was a lot of stuff that didn't seem to have context for me. And then when I finally got to character creation, everything clicked and I was good, and now I can appreciate it. And I was kind of like, as a designer, I'd never really thought about this really hard because my assumptions were so ingrained. I had never thought until this person said this. And I had talked about this issue many times in the structuring of the Blades book. But until someone said it on Twitter, it never occurred to me to ask, why didn't you start reading the character creation chapter? If that's what you like to start with, why didn't you start there? It never occurred to me. Like, you can just read it in any order you want, man. Like, I'm not the boss of you. And when I tweeted that, and then I was like, oh, that's a dick thing to say. Like, I shouldn't have said that. It's kind of passive aggressive. Like, ugh, I shouldn't have said that. But their response was really good. They were like, you know what? I never thought about that either. Like, I guess I just read from the beginning without thinking.
Yeah.
So it's on my mind right now as a designer. Like, that's something to talk about in the forward or in the table of contents or something. Like, hey, do you have a preference for how you read game books? Feel free, man. Like, start wherever you want. Like, this is my order, but if you want to read this first, go ahead. Like, maybe I need to give people permission.
Yeah. Signpost them out. Give them permission to use their own schema when they go through the book. Yeah.
Because there's always a trade-off. There's no way to create that order that's just going to solve everyone's problems. You're always going to alienate someone or whatever. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually really cool to me that you put that sort of thought into it, though. That's not a thing that I'd ever actually considered. And
man, it's a problem. It is such a problem. Game books are, and there's that vector, and there's also the reference book versus reading the thing as a text. What do you need when you're at the table? Versus now things are a little easier because you can just drown people in a PDF of supplementary sheets and things that they can print for their game. But it used to be a big problem. Like, should you reprint everything in the back so that they can quickly find everything? Or, it's that part of it is, that's what makes it fun, right? Because it's such a difficult problem. There's so many variables.
This is kind of reminiscent of sitting in on a UX design.
Yeah, for real.
The UX design of a tabletop role game in cover format.
Yep. That was my old career. Not UX exclusively, but graphic design for that stuff.
Yeah.
And even in that world, there are people who just didn't get, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like the idea that it's a trade-off was something that they couldn't wrap their head around. Well, we'll just have everything. It'll just do everything. How are you in this job and you don't understand that it's a trade-off? But, yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Doing it again. Sorry.
It's okay. At least we haven't had any trains tonight. So shout out to Jordan. We have one of our players lives relatively close to train tracks, so
100 meters
on a fairly regular scale. So on a fairly regular time scale, while we're playing at night, we will get train whistles.
Well,
and so
it's always right when we're like, "Hey, Jordan, what does your character think about this?" And like, flip up the mic.
That can be their Taikarosi demon telltale. They open their mouth and train noise.
That would be kind of amazing.
Can be anything but a whisper with that.
We had a bad guy. Matt Snyder has this game called 44, which is about everyone in your life is being replaced by mechanical duplicates, and you're the only one who knows.
Oh no.
Isn't that like a mental disorder as well? Like that's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
psychological disorder too.
I was gonna say a thing in Paranoia.
Yeah,
Also true.
it's a creepy horror game. In the first playtest, the GM described the character's running for an elevator, and the guy doesn't hold the door for him, and he opens his mouth to talk, and just dentist drill noise comes out. I've always kept that in my back pocket as like the meanest.
That is immensely unsettling.
If you really need to get them as the GM, you can have dentist drill noise.
Oh, that's like
your sound effect.
that's almost tooth mask bad.
It's bad. It's bad.
I
Sorry, chat. I didn't warn you. That's gonna get somebody. I'm sorry.
I have a new trauma I want to inflict on someone.
Oh,
It's so bad.
I think
It's
I just
super
took that
bad.
trauma in real life.
I believe that was called Haunted.
The other thing I was gonna just sort of touch on with the
Get closer to your mic.
the other thing I was going to touch on with the Devil's Bargain, is that the reality is, and I love this, that the GM could just do the thing, right? Like I could just do this thing, but I'm giving you as the player either the chance to okay this thing or to veto this thing.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool. I mean, you talked about it being collaborative earlier, but when you break it down to its like barest bones, I'm giving you this story agency. Would you like to take it from me?
Yeah. It's an offer, but it's loaded.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Gagan, the GM extraordinaire, he has a mean devil's bargain. I don't know if we put this in the book or not, but I can't remember. He's like, the devil's bargain is you can't resist the consequences of this roll.
Oh.
That is ooh.
It's like meta bargain.
That's
Right.
real bad.
It's this really mean extra reach, and you can tell the type of player. It's like a Rorschach test for the player, right? Most people are like, no way, that's no, that's obviously not worth it. Screw no. And then you get the guy who goes, oh yeah. And you're like, okay, now I know who I'm dealing with.
It almost feels
I
like
mean-
the DM version of like you're basically playing a game with a DM who's an anglerfish. Like you have that bait right there, and you're just trying to find that one that's just crazy enough to go for it.
Yeah, clearly it's a terrible idea, but yeah.
That's awesome. No, I would totally take that. I mean, I built my PC to be awesome at desperate actions and terrible at the consequences for them. So
What's the Monster Heart saying? Treat your character like a used car.
like a stolen car, like play
Stolen
like
car.
drive it like you stole it.
This is a case of like internet telephone that is so good. I wish it was true. That is in Monster Hearts, and it's about the GM playing NPCs.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
But it's so good that everyone thinks it's for the players, and it totally should be, because it's the best advice. Avery's such a good writer, and everything she writes is great. But that little misunderstanding, I almost never correct, because I'm like, yeah, that's
still
do
really
that.
cool.
Treat your character
Yeah.
like a stolen car is just
Yeah.
the best. It's the best. Yeah.
Oh God. Actual play in the chat just said hardcore challenge. Play blades without any resistance rolls.
Oh.
I
I
mean,
mean,
It's a short game. I mean,
Yeah.
you want to play like 3 sessions. Like, yeah.
Jack had 0 resistance in 2 stats for like
Yes.
the first half of that campaign. So it's
and then like
kind of the same.
what's rolling -1 die with Daredevil?
I gotta roll 3 and take the lowest, or
3 and take
roll
the lowest.
roll
Yeah,
the
that's
3,
the-
roll 3 and add the 2 lower one, or subtract the lowest one from the second lowest one.
Yeah.
Something like, yeah.
That's a house rule that needs to exist. Yeah. Yeah. You just keep piling on the negative dice. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like 0 resistance, you still avoid the consequences.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
Dylan, I need to tweet this. Strash sent me this quote a while back, and I haven't shared it again. But Dylan Boats said something around there's this stark difference as a player between 0 damage in D&D or whatever, not taking damage, and the 0 stress from a resistance roll. There's a different feel.
Yes.
As a player at the table, there's something that happens in that moment where you're like, ugh! And getting 0 isn't like, man, that nothing happened. That was boring. It's like, whew, oh my god, I dodged that.
I got away with how much?
Yeah.
For free.
And you never know. That's the inequity of it. The fiction attached to that mechanic could be anything. It could be, this massive world-changing thing, or the tiniest little I get my hand on my knife before him little thing, and that cost me 6 stress. Like, why did I resist that? That was so dumb. That was not worth it.
I just reached quick.
Yeah.
Well, I think that may be close to a good wrapping up point for us.
I have one question.
Go for it. You give us a good.
I know I'm full of them. I'm really sorry.
Give us a good last question.
Don't apologize, Zach.
So in one of your other YouTube videos that I watched, it was a discussion with, I think, another game designer. You talked about, and I think you were using someone else's words when you did this. I'm sorry I can't come up with names because I'm like, my brain is not functioning fully right now. That the job of a game designer isn't to finish games, it's to fill notebooks.
Yeah.
And I really liked that turn of phrase. And then you talked about how you go back through those notebooks and you're like, oh, that's awesome. Oh, what was I thinking there? Like, what? And so the question I have to finish this out is, how old was the notebook that the foundational pieces of Blades in the Dark came out of?
That's a good question. Very old. Probably I could almost go get it. I want to say,
give it to me.
I'm gonna auction it on eBay. It was sometime between after Agon came out and Lady Blackbird, so that was 2008 maybe.
Okay.
Or a little before that. Not to do with it must have been right after. So 2008 is when we were playtesting Apocalypse World. So it was after that.
Okay.
Somewhere in there. 2008, 2009. This idea of taking that old Talislanta success range, which Apocalypse World was using, but doing dice pools, because I wanted I wanted dice pools for a very specific reason for that project, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't Blades related at all. It was I forget what it was, but when I saw Vincent's interpretation of Talislanta with the 2d6 rolls, I was like, oh yeah, this is really smart. This is a cool way to do that. But it's very closed off. You roll with your stat, and that's the end of the story. There's there's nothing to do there really. And I always loved the dice pool thing of get another die here and get another die there, and build your pool and do all these little moves to make that happen.
Yeah.
And Lady Blackbird, that's all that is. It's just this mining your character sheet for dice. So yeah, it was right around probably 2009 or something. But what's funny, and this happens all the time, this happened with Agon too. I forgot completely about it, and it was after Blades was already in production that I was going through old books and found it, and was like, oh yeah.
That's where that came from.
I thought of this back then. A year after Agon was published, I was collecting notebooks and moving them into another room. And the whole mechanism for that game was written in this notebook.
Oh wow.
And I completely forgotten about it. And I was like, why didn't I just find that? If I had found this, I would have saved me so much trouble. Instead, I was like, I have a new idea. But I just completely forgot about it.
I'm a genius.
You just
So that's
reinvented
why
the
it was
book.
Vincent Baker that said that, and I think that's why he says it. You could argue that your job as a game designer is to play games. That's another way to look at it. But I think filling notebooks as opposed to doing the work of game design is a good distinction, particularly for new designers, because it can be such a slog if all you do is sit at your Word doc or whatever and like stare at the page and try to write your game. That's so hard to do. If you instead like let your mind free from this project and just free associate, what would be a cool way? What's an engaging way to share dice? What's an engaging mechanic to create collaboration at the table? What's a fun way to roll numbers that gets people excited about something or whatever? And if you're just making notes, then just like we said before, like that's gonna program your subconscious with all this fodder. And 6 years from now, when you're working on your thing about elves, you're gonna go, "Oh, I have a good idea for a dice mechanic," and it's secretly in one of your old notebooks. But yeah, that's it. It's a combination. It's useful, but it's also like permission, to say it's okay. It's okay if you're not finishing everything and you're not having these like crystal clear thoughts. It's okay to just sketch and whatever.
Awesome. Yeah.
One of my favorite poets, Jane Hirschfield, is the opposite of this, and she's so annoying. Oh my god. She's like Mozart. She sits and she meditates, and then she writes the poem down, and it's done, and she publishes it.
Wow.
Yeah,
She's a witch.
it arrives in its final form.
She's a whisper.
She's a whisper, yeah.
What bargain did she have to make?
She came to Seattle one time, or probably many times, but I talked to her one, and I was like, "How dare you? You're a monster." And she kind of said the same thing. She's like, "Well, yeah, but like the meditation practice, that's my thing. That's my writing in my notebooks. I'm doing the work without writing it down necessarily, but I'm spending all this time building imagery, building ideas, building language in my head. And when it finally arrives, it's because of all this work that's chugging around in the background that doesn't care about the poem, doesn't care about the thing itself." So yeah, I think as game designers we can take that on board and say, it's okay. Give yourself permission. Just noodle around, have fun, write in your notebooks with no particular purpose, and that all will pay off in the long run. It's good practice.
Yeah, that's great. How tall is your stack of notebooks?
It's right over there. It's a lot. I actually switched to smaller and smaller page sizes over the years, because I used to get these like 8.5 by 11 kind of things, and then fill like a third of them and switch to something else, and then I had these like giant stacks of things that each had like 14 pages of notes in them. So they've gotten smaller and smaller. I'll So here's my wallet. Wow. Here's my Rhodia notebook. So this goes in my front pocket. And what I love about these is that you can get like every kind of interior grid or whatever. But also the thing they make the cover out of, it's like really durable.
Oh, nice.
I used to use like scout books or chipboard notebooks, which are great. But they get all like ground up and torn and messy. So yeah, Rhodia, it's like the smallest. I think it's the second smallest one they make. And what I love about this is I always have it with me at all times. There's a game in the back that I carry with me to play the Royal Game of Ur. If you haven't played the Royal Game of Ur,
okay, yeah,
I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. It's just right here.
That's with the four-sided dice.
Yeah. The binary dice chariot race game.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's the oldest game with a game manual.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's really good. It's very, very fun. Kind of proto backgammon, I guess.
Yeah.
But what I like about these, the pages are so tiny, you can't like go on a treatise, right? You have to just note, like, what if people got like an extra die for this, and that's like all you can write,
And move on.
and you move on. You just whatever.
Recorded.
That has helped me. I tend to design in layout. I build my layouts and then I write into the layout. And it's the same forcing function where it subconsciously like makes you think of concepts that fit that space.
Yeah.
So the smaller your notebook, the more kind of succinct your ideas, maybe, possibly.
Okay.
That's how I work anyway.
It's a cool thought.
Cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I do enjoy that since you're in black and white, that's your little black gaming book. I don't know what color it really is.
It is
but-
actually black. I only have black and gray things.
It's
well,
not
then
the
you're
webcam. It's just a feature
No.
of his
that's
living
the
space.
color of your house.
The whole this is all this is actually pretty accurate.
He's in the grayscale district of Seattle.
The makeup
So-
time for this interview must have been ridiculous.
It's intense. It's like a Pleasantville situation.
Do you label all the idea notebooks, or do you just kind of pile
No.
them up and you dig through like mining for gold?
Honestly, I almost never look at them. Yeah.
It's all the subconscious.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Um,
schema. You recorded it.
The act of writing it down loads it, and I kind of never look at them. And not never. Sometimes I do.
Mhm.
But mostly like it's like when you're learning a technique, a jujitsu or something. Like, it's one thing to watch a video or hear it or whatever, but just the physical activity
Mhm.
encodes it into your body.
Yeah.
And I think that's happens for me anyway, when I write it in my notebook.
No, that makes sense.
My brain goes, I should care about this more than usual. It would probably benefit me to go through my notebook, because I would have discovered the already written game system for a game that I struggled with for months.
We could have Blades 4 years ago, man. What is this?
But that's the funny thing, though. If you work in isolation, the thing can just be for its own self, and then the thing that it's right for, it can just naturally bubble up and connect through circumstance, instead of you like trying to I need to create the perfect thing for whatever. Instead, you have so much practice, like broadening your horizons or deepening or whatever.
Yeah.
When the problem arrives, you may have already solved it in the past without remembering, and it'll just kind of
That's awesome.
click together.
Yeah. Here's a question you don't have to answer.
Okay.
Do you ever read RPG books and take notes?
No, I don't take
Okay.
notes. I read every game. I used to try to play every game. Because for a while you could do that.
You could. That's a lot now.
Um,
That's a lot now.
Not anymore.
Not
Yeah,
enough
that's
days
over.
anymore, really.
Yeah, that is over. But I try to read every game if I can, possibly.
Cool.
But I don't take notes. Yeah, I'm not a like reader type.
Well, yeah, because I was just wondering, because your system, I mean, you've got your own like information processing theory going on here, and
Yeah.
like, you got the active memory stuff, and so you record your own thoughts by writing them down, but you record other people's thoughts that are interesting by reading them and probably processing them slightly different.
Definitely processing them by reading them. Yeah. And then and honestly, that the reading process is trying to stay current, state of the art. It's my job.
Yeah.
But also it's like a competition for what's going to be played. There's there's so many games, and I can only play one or two or something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's this brutal like culling process of what's going to get to the table.
Yes.
RPG Survivor.
staying an informed consumer of RPGs right now is like, it's work. It's work.
Crazy. It's
and I love it. But
Yeah,
it's work.
it's fantastic. We're super lucky.
Uh-huh.
And we're extra lucky because designers that are somewhat outside the mainstream, like Jackson Tegu, for instance, like that dude is making weird stuff and it's really good. And it used to be that if you went to go play, Jackson would be there and he would run this crazy thing that he made. And that's it. Like if you just have to be lucky and like live in the right part of the world. But now he has a Patreon and he puts all his games up and you can go find them. But that makes the problem even worse as a game designer. It's no longer like, well, I got to keep up with Modifius and D&D stuff and whatever, like the big 4 or 6 or whatever.
Yeah.
Now there's fucking Jackson Tegu too, who's just like turning out like you're a weird ghost or something, and you got to care about that.
You almost have to set up a Google alert to hit every time like the word role-playing games is written down somewhere.
Yeah, that's why I want to do this like Feature Friday thing. I want to try to
that's awesome. Cool.
Curate that space to some degree and be like, hey, here's something to care about. There's a lot of stuff out there, but here's a way to kind of focus in on parts of that thing that maybe you're not exposed to as much. And honestly, drive-thru is pretty good in that sense where you can go there and just like see the top 20 or whatever. That's I use that all the time to kind of take the temperature of the marketplace and see like, oh, okay, the new Changeling thing is #1. Like I had no idea that was wow. Like that's good info to have, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Read that to you guys.
And I mean, I guess you can always take a bit of a browse through Twitch or something as well.
Yep. Twitch is good. Particularly if you get into like, do you know Eric Vulgaris, his channel, Eric?
Yeah. He's running Torchbearer right now, I think. I've seen it a couple times.
He runs like, he runs 5 games a week on his channel and he plays in 2 others.
Jesus.
Yeah. He's the most prolific RPG streamer. I always say if you're a designer or a hobbyist and you hear about a game and you're like, oh, Dog Eat Dog, that sounds interesting.
He's currently playing it.
You can go to his channel, find the VODs, and watch people play. Like, basically any game you can name, you can go to his channel and watch people play it live. Because his variety is just off the hook.
Watching someone else play Dog Eat Dog has got to be a special kind of hell.
Yeah. Game is great, but it makes me super uncomfortable.
That game is rough.
I mean, it's supposed to. That's the point, right?
But,
yeah.
I mean, if you're into that kind of thing, you should play Steal Away Jordan. That's the deep cut.
Oh, really? I'm unfamiliar. I'll have to check that out.
Julia Ellingbo. Came out around the same time as Poisoned. I forget when that was, but 2006 maybe. It's on Lulu. You play slaves in the antebellum South.
Oh.
I remember reading about that in your Twitter thread now, yeah.
It does not pull its fucking punches at all.
That's a hell of a pitch.
Like it goes some places.
Gonna wreck you real bad and in the best way. Like, especially if you're not familiar with that part of history in a direct way, it's really good for that. I think every history class in our high school should just be role-playing games because I've learned so much.
Not to toot my own horn, but we definitely I taught for a while in Philadelphia, and then I taught at a really touchy-feely hippie school outside Philadelphia. And when I got the opportunity, myself and another teacher who was there, who had actually come to the school after running a comic book store, so he had like all of his leftover stock. We did do RPGs and stuff with kids. We did D&D specifically, but we also did just like sort of free form. You're in the situation now. What do you do to try to get them to conceptualize sociological issues from time periods that they weren't directly
nice.
In.
Dude, you're like my junior high civics teacher. Like
a
reborn.
little bit.
That's awesome.
So that was a very useful tool, I think. And that's, I mean, one of the things I've been really lucky that I got into RPGs as early as I did is one of the things I think it's helped me to do. I'm from a very small town, a very homogenous place, and it's helped me step into other people's shoes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is a gift that very few forms of media or entertainment can really give you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I
Absolutely.
keep coming back to this hobby. I think it's very, very good at that.
That's one of the greatest advantages that we have as gamers. Right. Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say it's. I want to say there's like a psychological effect of playing through something in a tabletop role-playing game. Your brain associates with it differently than just reading a first-hand account. Like your brain will remember it in such a way that I did this thing, not Thrognar the Barbarian did this thing. It's me, Zach, or me, Andrew, did this thing, or
yeah. It's like
we don't have a lot of data there, but video games do, and I think there's some correlation there that actually pressing the button to do the thing, it really does having a psychological effect, and arguably gaming is a deeper connection than that.
Yeah.
I've talked to a few other people who are trans, and having a chance to play a character who's a different gender than the one you're assigned as, kind of putting yourself in that headspace is really good for kind of figuring shit out.
Yeah, I bet.
Which like that's one of the things that helped me a bunch, and it was kind of one of those oh no obviously this and this later, but like having that thing where you can kind of share those experiences with people, and then like you said, just kind of pour your brain into another body almost.
Yes.
And kind of figure that stuff out is awesome in a way that not a lot of things can be.
That's so awesome. I mean, it's like a direct thing, right? Like that's what you want.
Yeah.
You want to explore the other body or the other self.
Right.
And you have this immediate visceral way to do it. It never occurred to me until I started gaming with trans people, and also Renee, who wrote Kagamatsu, and Avery, and other people who were transitioning during the process of making their games. As someone who was kind of an outsider to that, it was this combination of like being educated about the thing itself, but also like seeing how that point of view informs their work. It's this richer, Kagamatsu especially, probably like a big standout in that space, that it directly confronts those issues in a way that is a super fun role-playing game. But also you're woke a little bit, like it kicks you a little bit and makes you think about those things. And man, it just makes me so happy that there's a space for that. And Elf was talking about this the other day about shape shifting and all these ideas in gaming that we take for granted that are so trans oriented. They're so rich for that type of material. And oh man, there's I predict a rich vein of games in that space that are going to be really cool. Yeah.
That's also one
Exciting.
of the things that I really love about kind of not so much the resurgence, but like the thriving kind of indie scene, that's happening where people are making smaller games is, everybody's got all these different viewpoints, and this is a way for you to sort of kind of expose people to you, and the things that are important to you and your history. And that's just kind of rad, and I really like it.
Oh, it's so good. There's this old saw, like before this sort of political or progressive thing, when I was growing up in Kentucky anyway, that wasn't on our landscape so much. But we used to always talk about this idea that if you're a gamer, odds are you kind of know the world more than the average person, even if you're some like regressive weirdo. Like how to dispose of a body, like stuff that you wouldn't normally know. And that's because of the content of our games and the focus on killing or whatever. And when we create games that focus in other ways, it's the same thing. It's just a different landscape, and we can have these. I don't know. Like I don't necessarily buy into completely a political agenda for game design. Like I think you should make the thing that inspires you the most. And if the thing that inspires you the most is educating people who don't get it, then you should definitely do that. But you can always tell the difference between the game that is just a political screed and a game that's a fun role-playing game, right? Those are two different things, and they should both exist, but they're not the same thing. And then there are these. That's why I always focus on these beautiful gems, like Allie in chat right now, Mad Pro. She has this great game as a Blades hack called Misbehavin', and it's Prohibition era gangsters plus magic, but it's this thing she's talking about, which is having power and using that power to help people. That's a thing that's not common in gaming, right? Usually power is used to destroy your enemies. And so you can create a role-playing game where when you get power, there's an avenue for helping your community, building other people up, changing their circumstances, yada yada yada. That's super political, but it's also like good game design. It's a powerful avenue to explore as players. And I hope anyway, in this current climate, it is particularly for me as an outsider, like if I feel like the trans thing especially is so powerful in our community right now. Everywhere I turn, every show, every Twitch stream, every game, like I'm just like, this is amazing. It just feels like this blossoming of this space. But that's just my opinion as an outsider. I don't know how it hits you, but it feels like there's a moment happening. Around.
I think a little bit is kind of the surroundings for a lot of people are super oppressive. So this is, I think the internet where you know people and you can talk to folks. There's going to be assholes, and that's just kind of that's just going to happen. But like it's a place where you could just go, hey, fuck it, here's me, what's up, deal with it. Like, this is my little room, and I'm gonna do my thing, and either you can watch it or you can get out. And like just being able to be yourself in at least one place, and just have some people, like some people can't be out at work or else they'll get fired, or some people can't be out to their family. So even having one little outlet is like a huge steam release, like a pressure valve. And anything that can do that for somebody is a huge help.
Is it true that there's I'm like tokenizing you right now super bad.
No,
I'm sorry.
What's up?
But like the being someone else, right? Like that's a core principle of our hobby. The ability to try on another being something that you aren't, right? There seems to be an obvious connection there, right? Is that just surface nonsense, or is there something to that? Do you think that matters to the?
I think, part of me wonders if that's one of the things that actually drew me to playing RPGs and stuff. Was it pretty much my whole life I've always felt like this me doesn't feel right, I guess. So being able to sort of like, okay, I'm gonna try this one on. It's better, but this is still weird, and just kind of getting to hop over and over until you find something where you're like, oh wait, hold on, this may be something. Oh wait, I do like being a pretty princess. Huh.
Yeah.
I want to be a pretty princess who marries another pretty princess, and then
and then they fly off in their skyship and murder cops.
Those cops had it coming.
It's like a safer space to explore something. Yeah.
Right, and I mean that's one of the things is when you're doing, if you're actually committing to role playing and stuff, you're gonna feel like an idiot at first. You're worried that people are gonna judge you, but after a certain point, you become comfortable with the people you're playing with, kind of to a point where it's okay to kind of pull some of the outer layers off a little bit, and kind of give them a peek under the hood, I guess.
Yeah.
Like when I came out, the people on the podcast were one of the first people I came out to, aside
Mm.
from after my wife, and like they've been nothing but like the most positive and supportive people in the world, and it's meant a lot, especially during like shitty days. It's like I have a group of people here who just they like me as a human being, and that's something.
That's so wonderful.
But
I mean that's why we're here, right? Like
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
we're here to make fun games and have fun, but there's a lot of ways to have fun.
Oh yeah.
There's something more to this hobby. There's something extra, and we should appreciate what that is. And my own experience in like queerness, for lack of a better word, I always hesitate to call it that because I talked to Andrew about this on we had a very long video we did a while back. This like 6-hour talk, and it's complicated, but I just wanted to say that resonates with me in that small way, that there's a space for, like, particularly with like masculinity and expressions of masculinity and straightness and maleness. Like there's a space in gaming in my own experience that has let me push those boundaries before society was ready for those things to be pushed.
Yeah.
It's okay for me to I could play a woman, let's say, and when I was 13 in Kentucky, in 1986, I could like acknowledge the attractiveness of a man, without it being you're a homo or like that.
Right.
That simple little thing is a way of stepping into that space. And now in 2018, that is just, I feel like it's multiplied into this much richer space of exploration, but also like acceptance. And it's hard for me to talk about that because I am not in a vulnerable position, right? Like I'm not taking risks. No one is judging me. No one like it's very easy for me to say those things. So I try to avoid pontificating on stuff when I'm not at risk. But at the same time, like I want to acknowledge that our community, the broader Twitch community of gamers here, like we got to give some props. I think like there's been some really awesome community growth, and I'm just seeing this. It feels so good. It feels so good to see the space dissolve away from a bunch of straight white dudes as the main.
There
focus.
was, I think it was Overwatch, like the top ranked one of the players in the world, just in the middle of a stream was like, yeah, maybe I'm trans. By the way, it's true, I'm trans. And they're just like kept on playing and like kicking everybody's ass with a robot who could turn into a turret. And I was like, holy shit, like.
Oh, that's so awesome. I didn't
was like
see that.
1,800 people watching. I was like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm trans. I'm also this cool robot. What's up?
And then like gets 3 headshots. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
It is.
Yeah, and that's, we're talking about game design. We're talking about techniques and methods and what do you do as a designer? And I think this touches on that, right? It's part of your responsibility to care about these things and to create whatever you're making is going to create a little subculture at the table, and your subculture is going to be political. And if you don't make it political, you're going to inject it with the default politics that you don't understand about yourself.
Yeah.
So there's no way to make it apolitical, right? It's going to have an opinion about these things. It's going to have an opinion about personhood and social class and whatever, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Blades' like thing is criminality, right? Like, why do we think people are criminals in their essence? People are complicated, and the fact that you're a criminal doesn't define you. It's a thing you did. It's not who you are. And that being intentional about those choices as much as you possibly can is important. And if you are in a powerful group, if you're like me, if you're a straight white dude, like I'm not fucking straight, but whatever. Like if you're a straight white man, like it behooves you to get fucking educated about this stuff and understand things that you need to do, because it's not it's easy to think of these things as other people's problems.
Yeah.
And it's cool that our gamer space is opening up and allowing people with different voices to step in. That's one part of it, and that's really important. But it's bullshit to go, well, you're a trans person, you need to write the games for trans people.
Yeah.
You're a person of color, you need to, like, of course you should, like of course telling your own story, using your own voice is what matters.
Right.
But to just have it like you just got to carry the weight on your own, you know, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
We're just keep doing our white dude shit over here.
Yeah, whatever, that's on you. Make your weird game over there. No, it's part of our whole responsibility together to be in this together.
Yeah.
And it's easy to think of default, or to just treat everything like defaults instead of, and I would do this later in your process, not earlier, because it's paralyzing at the early stages. Like at the very end of your process, get a sensitivity reader, you know, play with people who are outside your normal space and who are not you in their experience and their place in our culture. And then have some honest assessment of that stuff. Like, what am I saying about if Blades in the Dark ultimately was like, you know what's cool? Doing crimes and hurting people. Like if that was its ultimate message, like you get away with it and everyone lives happily forever. So just, you know, murder and it's all good. Everything's the best. If that's the message that it was telling, I would have to own that. I would have to take responsibility for that. So, yeah, I don't demand this turned into like a fucking rant, but
No.
It's this super important, and it's not just like social justice warrior bullshit. This is game design. It's a challenge. It's the same way you balance your magic user is how you talk about your politics. It's the same.
You have
the same.
You have to treat other viewpoints as worth considering in the first place.
Yeah.
And like, you know, we haven't published anything, but that's kind of been one of our things we've tried to do from the beginning is, you know, I don't care if you've never played before, if you've had bad experiences or whatever, you're welcome here. We're friends. As long as you come here to you know, be cool, then we're going to have a good time. And that's kind of been the mission statement from day one, I think.
Yeah. And I think we're all chipping away at it, right? It's not on one person to do everything.
Right.
We all are contributing. We're all taking the load. And yeah, Ali in chat is talking about the own voices kind of thing, which is at once a great idea and also really difficult and weird. To just be like, yeah, it's on you guys. Like, dude, talk about your experiences.
Yeah.
It's complicated. And I think in the spirit of the 7 to 9, like we should embrace that. We should say, like, you know what's fun? The really good thing is the complicated success, and that's what we need to wrap our arms around and really champion that, right? And be like, yeah, this is where we are. It's a complicated success, and we're gonna ride that out. It's gonna be a real good story.
Well, yeah, because we're now in the most interesting option, right? We have everybody with all sorts of with very interesting and divergent viewpoints coming together, playing games. Some of them are making games, some of them are running games. I really personally cherish the opportunity to step into someone else's game who has a perspective different than mine. Because it's the ability to what they did with their game, what they did with their setting, and what they're doing with you as a player tells you about them, about their life, about their perspective in a way that you could read about or you could listen to them talk, but they can put you in it. Even if you are not in the game the same as they are. Like even if I'm not playing a trans person in Erin's game, the way that Erin thinks about things comes through in the way she runs games, and therefore I'm getting some small piece of that every time I show up to play one of her games.
Yeah. And that's not just being, I mean, it's being a good person. I don't want to minimize that. It is being a good person, but it's also, that's the core GM skill,
Yeah.
right? You listen, you ask questions, and you build on the answers. It's the core player skill. You listen to the setting and the situation and build on what the GM has provided to do something. You listen to your fellow players. The core activity of our hobby is not talking. It's listening to the other people. So we're uniquely positioned as an activity. The essence of what we do as our hobby is listening to other voices. And if we can't embrace that, then why are we even gamers, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to, we can't successfully play a role-playing game without doing that. Yeah.
I'm just now realizing the last 2 seasons of games I ran have been pretty much complete body horror. Which being a prisoner in your own, holy shit. No, I didn't.
That's the shit, right?
It's just where you're at. It's just where you're at.
Whoa,
right?
no,
Yeah.
You mean the teleporter that reassembles you at a different place after turning
crushes
you
you
into
and
goo?
sluices you to a different floor? Yes, that's
The destruction of your own body and creating a new one. Why would that be related to? Yeah. What a crazy idea.
I literally did not put that in together until Zach said that thing like 45 seconds.
That's amazing. That's so good.
Oh shit. Okay. This has
That's
been
so
this has
good.
been a great night on so many levels.
So this is gonna be. I'm gonna take a little bit of a trip here. So I've already talked about how I used to taught. Probably the best experience of my life was I taught at a small D democratic school where everybody sort of made the decisions by consensus. It was a very interesting experience. I would highly recommend it if you can find one for your kids, if you ever have them. Everybody that's watching, it's amazing. But it was also a very touchy-feely, like hippie school full of people who were essentially hippies and their kids. And they assigned at one point, one of the parents came in and assigned each of the faculty members a spirit animal. Right? And where I'm going with this was my boss, the woman I worked under at this place, had been doing this job, had been sort of organizing the cats at this place, right? Getting them all in a row, doing all these things, interacting with all these humans, building consensus for 40 years or something like that, right?
Wow.
Lots of experience just like dealing with the human condition, listening to people, building consensus. The spirit animal she got assigned was human. Her spirit animal was human. And it sounds weird, right? It sounds weird when you say it. But if you think about it, what she did that whole time was listen. She listened to everyone. And she listened to people and she appreciated their ideas and tried to get them to a place socially where they could function and interact with other people. And that's a very human thing. It's a thing that only humans do, right? My dog can watch a movie, right?
Yeah.
I have suspicions cats can read, but
Only tuna cans.
I am 100% sure that this hobby is a human thing. At least as we understand animals and life on this planet, humans do this thing, and it's to my mind, the most human hobby, the most human thing I can be spending my entertainment time doing. For exactly the reasons you laid out. We listen, we collaborate, we learn from each other, and there aren't that many other things you do where that's the whole deal. Right?
Yeah. As your agenda, if you come into the gaming hobby with an agenda to tell your own story, succeed at what you want to succeed at, and like be like follow your own path and do your own thing. The hobby itself is going to fight you at every turn because every part of what we do is going to twist and turn and fight that mentality.
Impose variables.
Yeah, there's at some level it's going to disrupt the self-powered thing. And there are some games designed to minimize all of those obstacles to that and make it as singular as it can be. But they're in the minority, I think. And in a space now where it's kind of going the other way, and we're seeing what's beautiful about that, and not in a abstract, wouldn't it be nice kind of space, but in a practical, this is a good way to play a game space. And we don't have to argue about hypotheticals or anecdotes as much as saying like, well, this is actually good. Like if you do this, it works out better when you don't do it. So that's a nice place to be. It's not theoretical. It's not just a weird design cul-de-sac that no one cares about. It's somewhat empirical now. It's getting into that space of this just works, and you should care about this. It's good.
Yeah.
It's a nice place to be.
Yeah.
It would suck if it was the other way around, right? If the fascistic, like autocratic method was the best way to play role-playing games, I would be very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be no good.
It turns out that's not true. So that's good. We dodged that bullet.
Dodge that bullet.
Well, that's when you say no and start, rolling your resistance dice.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeez, it's almost 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
Wow. Time flies.
It really does.
I guess we should probably wrap up.
I mean, I don't think any of us want to wrap up.
Yeah.
No.
Time is time.
We seriously need to do something again. You've been fantastic, and
Yes.
for an event that I didn't think would happen in the first place, this has gone beyond my wildest expectations.
It's been super fun. I mean, I just want to get out of the gate ahead of Adam and Jerry. I want to have the best show. I'm raising the bar as high as I can. They have
You have set a very high bar.
It's
they have a
pretty
lot.
high bar.
Adam and Jerry. I'm just gonna assume their shows are worse. And
I mean, after this, that's not an unfair assumption.
Uh,
I'm gonna retire undefeated from that D&D podcast.
to one up me, they've got to. I mean, to one up you, they've got to make me cry twice at least.
Well, you also can't retire from that D&D podcast when you're going to come back for a Blades campaign, right?
Or one shot.
Damn it! I'm on such a high note. That's a losing bargain for me. Can't. I really should not come back.
No, like at any point, we would be super happy to have you back. This has been
Me too. It was
fantastic.
great.
It was really awesome talking to you. Before we do our wrap up stuff, do you have anything you want to plug? Social media? Go for it.
Yes. Twitter tomorrow, Feature Friday.
Yeah.
I'm gonna feature a new designer. Not new, but a designer you should follow. So look out for that. Scum and Villainy, Strash, Ashimovics, and John Lewis Little's amazing pulp space adventure game was announced today. It's coming out. Evil Hat is publishing it. It is all of your Firefly plus Cowboy Bebop plus Star Wars fantasies rolled into one game.
Looks really good.
It's super good. It might be the Monster Hearts to Blades Apocalypse World. Like it might be like the good version of Blades in the Dark, maybe. It's really good. It's really, really good. So look out for that coming out this year.
Nice.
And there'll be more updates. Follow Strash and Evil Hat to find out stuff about that. And I already mentioned it, but Allie, who's in chat tonight, she has an incredible Blades hat called Misbehavin', with an apostrophe. The Prohibition era gangsters plus some light magic elements. If you are a Blades fan and you want to try something new that is not Duskwall, but is also like gritty criminal ghosty stuff, definitely look. She has a Patreon. You can go to her Patreon. I don't know if it might be Mad Perot, it might be Ali Bustion. I forget exactly where it is. I'm sorry, I don't have it up right now, but you can find it. Misbehavin', Patreon.
Okay.
We can throw a link in chat.
Yeah.
Throw a link in the
Or,
description.
description on YouTube.
Do that.
Yeah.
Do that. It is so good, and it's in development now. And go play it. It's fantastic.
Oh,
Mad Puro.
we
There
just,
you go.
Mad Puro.
we
Yes.
just got the link posted.
There it is. Patreon.com/Mad Puro. MAD.
Pierrot.
Pierrot. Yeah. It's super good.
Thank you, Quantum Dot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Mikey's on top of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, thank you for coming. Thanks, Andrew
Yeah.
and Zach, for showing up.
This was
Yeah.
this was a pleasure.
Real happy I came.
Thank you to
It
everybody
was.
at home who tuned in. We'll be putting this out on YouTube. If you're watching it live, I posted a link in the chat earlier for a giveaway for the Blades in the Dark rulebook PDFs that will end tomorrow at midnight. So get that entry in. And while you're here, mark your calendars for next Friday, where we're interviewing Jerry Holkins from Penny Arcade, Acquisitions Incorporated C Team, and several other things. And
Way less cool than John. Let's be real.
And on
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he's just Jerry Holkins. What's the big deal?
That's a 7 to 9 interview at best.
And on the 21st, Jesus, Zach, on the 21st, we are interviewing Adam Kobol, who is known for having cool hair and also makes games or whatever.
Yeah.
Not really.
He's known
Eats
for
a lot
having
of
hair on the
ramen.
internet. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna end the stream. I'm gonna push the buttons, and thank you, everybody. Everybody's fantastic.
Good night, everybody.